Okay. You ready? I'd like to call to order the committee of the whole meeting for Tuesday, January 14th. First item on our agenda tonight is roll call.
Araza.
Here.
Lancy.
Here.
Beck.
Here.
Pieper.
Here.
Malone.
Here.
Solfa. Wolf.
Here.
Barron.
Here.
Lehman.
Here.
Ayazi.
Here.
Malay. Ewer.
Here.
Cerrone.
Here.
Vogelsinger.
Here.
It's 12 of 14.
Next is item 2, which is a reminder to please speak directly into the microphone for the recording and broadcast of tonight's meeting. And item 3 is approval of minutes for December 12th, 2024. Anybody have any comments or corrections or anything on those? If not, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion. Nancy? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4 is items to be removed, added, or changed for tonight. Anything?
No.
Nothing. Okay. 5, which is matters from the public for items not on our agenda tonight. Is anybody here for anything not on the agenda? If you'd like to come up and use the microphone, we just need your name for the record. Right there at the microphone. Just make sure that the microphone lights up green when you start talking.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Justine Nees. I've been a resident of Batavia for 30 years. I live at 1029 South Batavia Avenue. It's right near the corner of 31 in Carlisle. In the 30 years that I've lived in Batavia, I've been largely happy with a lot of the decisions that have been made. And I love living in Batavia. I think it's a great town. I'm very happy here. However, in the last few years, the city council, well, maybe I should backtrack a little bit. I haven't had a lot of involvement with the city council because in those 30 years, I've been working and looking after my family and just electing people to represent me. So, that's where I'm at right now. However, recently, I've been made aware of some decisions that have been made by the city council that have made me scratch my head, let's put it that way. Okay? I should also introduce my neighbors.
We're here for moral support. We live at 1023, right next door. I'm Jim Fairchild and my wife, Rebecca. And we are of like mind on this.
Okay. We did attend the meeting about the road diet, and I just wanted to give you my input because my neighbors and I see what's going on day after day, every hour. So I consider us experts in a sense. I know that a lot of traffic studies have been done on the area, and that's all well and good, but I think that it falls short of being there all the time to see what's happening. Okay, I'm not here to challenge the decision that was made. I know that it was a done deal, and it's there, and we're living with it, and I respect municipal government. I don't want to second guess anyone or get really heavy in my criticism. However, I do want to let you know what is going on. And that is people still speed. It hasn't changed. Now, people, when they're forced to slow down, and that's during times when rush hour, when there's a lot of traffic, sure, they're forced to slow down. But other times, and there's many other times, people still speed. And my neighbors and I have been wanting to have the speed limit reduced for years. Now, we've met with 2 state representatives. One of them blew me off. The other one was very gracious, I would have to say. However, our discussion went nowhere.
Actually, her suggestion was maybe we put speed bumps on Route 31. That was my response. Yes.
Okay. Some of the other problems with the road diet is that those center lanes are made for people to turn, but people are using them to pass, and they're not made for that purpose. So I'm just giving you my feedback. I know it's a done deal. I know we're living with it. That decision has been made. So I'm not trying to change anything. But there are two things that I would like the city council to know. And that is that the speed limit, doesn't work. And it hasn't worked for a long time. And my neighbors and I haven't quit in that respect. One of the state representatives indicated to us that IDOT, is in charge. It all goes to IDOT, so there was nothing that she could do. We don't accept that explanation. We're not going to let it go there. If we have to go to IDOT ourselves, that's what we're going to do. Okay?
She had also stated that the police department did not put in for the permits to lower the.
Not true.
This is what we were told. Yes. So I'm just sharing with what we were told.
Sure. If I could, it was around the same time that the city was applying for the permits to install the road diet that we asked for after the fatal incident at Millview and the near fatal incident at Union. We petitioned the IDOT to reduce the speed limit all the way throughout the road diet, all the way from Mooseheart Road, all the way to Fabian Parkway.
Perfect.
And in each segment of the road, at each mile per hour, they disagreed with us, and they refused to change the speed limit on that road. So, I have the same recommendation as the state elected official that if people petition the Illinois Department of Transportation, maybe that is something that will get action, because the city has exhausted its resources.
And yet on 31 north of Fabian, the speed limit is 35. South of Mooseheart, it's 35.
Yes,
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I agree with you.
We don't make them.
I agree with you.
It's been that way for years.
And when it comes to issues where you see speeding and you see improper lane usage, if you would report that to the city, then we will put enhanced enforcement in place. And I understand sometimes enhanced enforcement works while the enhanced enforcement is there, but we will go back over and over again.
I stopped and spoke to an officer that was sitting in the church on Main and 31. And he said, regardless what the rules of the road say, that is a passing lane.
It is a passing lane when someone is stopped on the side of the road. Let's say if it is garbage pickup day,
Absolutely.
the center lane may be used to go around a stopped vehicle, but it is not to go around slow-moving vehicles.
We've had people passing somebody
Yeah.
doing the speed limit in the center median.
I will,
We have had it. And
Eric?
coming around the bend on 31 south of the cemetery, which is where we live, that's a dangerous location, and we've had plenty of accidents out there. So this is why we're here.
okay, I understand.
And I just want to confirm, you are correct. It is not a passing lane. Our officers are aware it's not a passing lane. I'm not sure what the miscommunication or misunderstanding was between you and that officer. We can certainly reiterate that with our officers, but it is not a passing lane. Should we observe that, we are taking enforcement action.
Fantastic. And can you crack down on the speeding?
We will conduct extra patrols out on Route 31 for you folks, definitely.
Fantastic. The big thing is, even with the wide shoulder that is now there,
Yes,
I still have traffic. Of course, I'm watching traffic when I go out to get my mail. Of course. I've lived on that section of road for over 30 years. I have vehicles swerving at me, even though they have plenty of room in their new lane just to get my mail. It's ridiculous. And they're not doing the speed limit. That's why we're here. Is that it?
I think that's it.
Okay.
I really appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move to item, no, is there anybody else that has anything else that's not on the agenda tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
John Clayton, I think I'm in the right place. From what I've read, I'm really concerned about putting the marijuana medical dispensary in the old Arby's.
That is an item that is on the agenda,
Oh, okay, so I don't.
and we'll have an opportunity for public comment at that time. Sure.
Okay. We'll move on to item 6, which is our consent agenda for tonight.
Yes,
Alderman.
Your Honor, the consent agenda reads as follows. Resolution 2025-2-R, authorizing the purchase of 3 2025 Ford Police Inceptor hybrid utility all-wheel drive vehicles from Curie Motors of Frankfort, Illinois, for an amount not to exceed $147,315. Resolution 2025-3-R, authorization to purchase 4 2025 Ford trucks from Morrow Brothers Ford for $228,740. Resolution 2025-8-R, authorizing execution of a 1-year renewable contract with WA Management, Inc. for the 2025 East Side property maintenance. Resolution 2025-7-R, approval of truck equipment purchase from Diversified Fleet. Resolution 2025-5-R, approval of purchase of Overwatch lift station systems at wastewater treatment plant for Challenge and Harville lift station rehabilitation with a cost not to exceed $105,423.35. Resolution 2025-6-R, approval of installation of Overwatch pump systems with Doming Mechanical Industries, Inc. for the Challenge and Harville lift station rehabilitation in the amount not to exceed $376,000. Resolution 2025-4-R, approving task order number 2 with BHMG Engineers Incorporated to provide engineering services for 34 kV circuit extension. I move we approve the consent agenda as follows, as read. Second.
Okay, we have motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, I just have one comment on that. Chief, do you know, do they have those, the hybrid versions this year? I know we didn't get them the last time we tried to order those.
So the vendor from which we're purchasing is optimistic that we will get the hybrids this year. We are optimistic as well. But I can't say definitively,
Okay.
but that is our intent, is to purchase the hybrid
I didn't know
model
if they
again.
already had them or not, so.
Yeah, they do not have them right now, but they are optimistic that they will, and I'm anticipating taking hybrids this year.
Great, thank you. And then we'll move on to item 7, which is ordinance 2025-005, annexing properties on South Verdant Road and Wagner Road. Scott?
Thank you. This is the next phase of our annexation of the islands that are surrounded by the city limits. In this case, we've already heard annexation agreements and approved annexation agreements for 4 of these 10 properties that are in this area that are voluntary petitions to annex. So we have, 4 of them have been approved and recorded, and these are the other properties that include those plus the ones that we do not have agreements with but voluntarily agreed to annex. So this is just kind of our next phase of this. These properties would all be zoned R0 once annexed, and they would be in wards 1 and 6 divided by the ward boundary after annexation.
Does anybody have any questions on these? And these are all pretty standard annexations. There's no additional terms on any of those.
No,
right?
well, we have 4 of the properties had the annexation agreements we've already approved, and that includes those properties in this group.
All right, if we have no questions, I will make the motion that we recommend to council ordinance 2025-005, annexing properties on South Verdant Road and Wagner Road. Second. Motion by Wolf, second by Malone. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Record reflect that. Alderman Sofa is here?
7:16 PM.
7:16.
Christopher Sofa is present.
Okay. We will move on to item number 8, which is ordinance 2025-004, conditional use permit for recreational cannabis dispensary in the general commercial district, Duchess Cannabis, 144 South Randall Road, Rubino Ventures, applicant. Sure.
Thanks. So this evening, we do have ordinance 2504, which would allow a recreational cannabis dispensary at the former Arby's site at 144 South Randall Road. On December 18th, the Plan Commission did hold a public hearing regarding the proposed use by Rubino Ventures. And I'll briefly summarize basically what occurred at the hearing. But essentially, the applicant and their team of operations and security staff, along with their design team, were there to answer questions from the commission and the public. The applicant noted that this would be a revitalization of a long vacant property and generate new sales tax and activity on Randall Road in the community. They did identify several aspects of the comprehensive plan that would be met with their proposed use, including generating additional activity in Randall and expanding the retail base of the community. Their VP of Operations, Alexis Biggie Prow, was present. She did note that the proposed use would employ about 14 people at this location, with 7 staff members typically on each shift. The applicant did provide examples of their other locations and the work that they've done taking over those locations. They did note that Duchess Cannabis is a woman-owned and operated business. That also part of how they differentiate themselves is also that they work with the smaller cannabis cultivators and infusers in the marketplace. The applicant also, during the course of the presentation, outlined their security procedures, as well as how customers go through the process of checking in, transacting, and leaving the facility. For the public hearing, there was one letter that was put on the public record that was received prior to the hearing. There was no members of the public that addressed the commission at the public hearing. To go back to where the other locations, the representatives of Duchess Cannabis did note that they have existing operating locations in Oak Park and Morgan Grove, and that they are currently working through the 4 locations on Lake Zurich and North Riverside, and that our location in Batavia would be the 5th when it opened. The applicant did note that they would be looking to operate this summer. The Plan Commission did ask several questions about the security procedures. The applicant did note that there would be security personnel present on the property whenever the business was in operation pursuant to the state requirements. They did, through the discussion of the procedures, noted that they would scan all customer IDs as part of their process. And they did answer some questions about the security film that is required by the state that's on windows. Essentially, that would tint the windows but not make them completely opaque. It was also noted that the Batavia Police did review the existing locations with their counterparts, and they were found to be conducted appropriately in those locations. So overall, the Plan Commission did recommend approval subject to conditions. They did add a recommended condition of hours of operation consistent with what the applicant is proposing. They also added a condition to make sure that the operations was consistent with the plans presented to the commission. So they did recommend approval by a vote to 5-0, and staff does recommend approval of the ordinance tonight as presented. And I should note that the applicant's attorney and other staff members are present to provide a presentation to the commission or to the council tonight and answer any questions you might have.
Anybody have any questions tonight on this? Anybody want to start? Hey, we're going to, ma'am, if you'd like to have a seat, we're going to have a discussion between the council first, and then we'll take public comment. So does anybody have any questions? I guess I was, okay, go ahead, Abby.
I have a design question. Looking at the layout and the location of the bike racks and the sidewalk looks very skinny, and would the presence of bikes bump people out into the parking lot as they're walking?
So we would review the location with the actual permit, and we would look to make sure that basically ADA access is maintained. But we do have some parameters about how far it should be from the door in the zoning code. But we can make sure that it's in a location that wouldn't impact pedestrians walking into the location.
Other questions? Leah?
Just asking on behalf of some people who reached out. I'm sure it's, according to our zoning code, it's an appropriate site with its location near the high school, because I know there was some concern with the location near the high school.
Sure. So when we adopted our requirements for cannabis dispensaries, there were a number of locations that our local requirements are that a dispensary be located at least 500 feet away from. That includes a school property. So this property is approximately 800 feet away, property line to property line. I believe it's actually 830 to be specific. But it is outside of those, all of our required setback requirements. We do have basically additional requirements than what the state would require. Really, the state only, in their regulations, only speak about advertising being 1,000 feet away from a school, but that's the only school-related regulation that was put into the state act. So we do go above and beyond with that 500-foot setback, but the applicant would be complying with those setbacks.
Yeah, just one more question, probably for Chief Blowers, is do we see any kind of like crime increase or anything around dispensaries?
So in talking to our neighboring agencies and counterparts that have had dispensaries for some time now, most of them have had very few, if any, issues with the dispensaries within their communities.
So first, it was a very well put together application, and so most of the questions I had were answered through there. But maybe just for everyone's information, one concern I'm hearing a lot is access from folks who shouldn't have access, right? Minors, folks underage. Maybe we can talk a little bit, give us some insights on how are we going to be ensuring that people over the age of 21, as the law states, are the ones who are accessing these services and not those, say, under the age of 21 or otherwise accessing services.
Sure. I believe we can have the applicant come up and within their presentation, I believe they address that particular concern. But essentially, they would be doing the appropriate checks to make sure that those 21 and older or that are allowed to purchase from a cannabis dispensary are allowed to do so.
Nick?
Just a clarification for what we've decided. When this first became legal, did we create an ordinance or a policy about having it only in the industrial areas, not on the retail corridors? Was that before?
No, because we didn't approve any dispensaries when we originally
So did we
went
talk
through.
about, I can remember talking about that, but was that when it was only cultivation centers?
So yeah, there's basically kind of a couple of aspects in terms of regulation. We do, for infusers and other uses, we do require those to be in the industrial park. The craft growers, for example, is another one. But I believe, I don't have the code in front of me, and maybe Scott can correct me, but I believe we do allow basically a dispensary to be in the industrial district. But we do, part of the discussion was whether dispensaries should be downtown or on Randall Road, and consensus was to allow them in the general commercial district. In part, there was more eyes on those areas, and those are the more trafficked, and more, commercially accessible areas. So when we did go to allow dispensaries in 2020, or after the referendum in 2020, and so it was adopted in 2021, we did create location requirements that are within the code, but would allow it in the general commercial district.
Yeah, most of the other uses for transporting, infusing, those types of uses, those are primarily focused in the industrial districts. There were craft growing facilities also that were allowed in the industrial districts as well, but the general ones, we also added to the general commercial district to let them in those areas.
And I should say, as a conditional use specifically in the commercial district, the general commercial district.
Any other questions? Comments? I guess I'll say that, when we originally approved this, one of the things that I asked a couple questions on, and memory serves me right, that was, on the license side of it, to the ability if they were to sell to underage, consumer, that they're, I think, extremely cautious how they run that business, because I believe it's just one strike from the state of Illinois on losing the license. And the hoops that they have to go through to get the license to cite one of these, and then whatever the municipal requirements are on top of that, is quite significant. So I don't think that, they do this haphazardly. I mean, this is something that they have to watch. Their security is, as far as I know in the state, has been excellent at any one of the facilities that's out there. And, the amount of money that they run through these businesses, their security is a prime concern to the owners, the employees, everybody that's there. So to me, this is something that they take very seriously from the time they decide to do this. And having multiple locations, I'm sure they've dealt with different ordinances in different cities that treat these differently. So, I think, to me, this is a business that somebody doesn't get into lightly, doesn't just decide one day, hey, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go open up a dispensary. This is something that, they plan out, they think this through, they have all the legal, requirements met to be able to get to this point. And, they take the business very seriously, how it's handled. And the state takes it very seriously, how it's handled. The reporting requirements and everything else are extreme, to say the least, for what they have to go through. So, the research that I did before we approved this back in 20, I think, to me, it's just been frustrating that we haven't had this application here yet, that this is the first one we've got that's made it this far. So I would like to see us approve this, because I think that, this is something that we just can't ignore, in the communities that we're in and around us. Pretty much everybody has one. Tim?
Yeah, and I'll just make mention for anyone that's, worried about the underage selling. I mean, I work in these spaces from a professional standpoint, and to kind of double down on your security aspects of it, I mean, it's almost to the point of outrageousness what they make them go through. Be much more concerned about underage alcohol sales than you are this. They will not even be able to get in the door. Much harder with a fake ID. The process to get inside of these places is, like getting inside of Fort Knox. So I wouldn't be concerned of that. And, anyone who is should just go walk into the place and see what it's like to get screened to go in there.
Sir.
I agree with what you have said. I agree with what Alderman Lamptey said. It is top-notch security, the whole beginning to end when you enter these places. So I'm not concerned, and I don't think we should have large concerns about it being underage users. Be far more concerned about underage alcohol. And we are really kind of at a nice place. I would have liked to see this sooner too, but other towns have had them, so we can learn from that. This applicant has other locations. They've worked out any kinks. So really, this is a pretty exciting opportunity.
Anybody else? Any other comments? Does the applicant want to come up and say a little bit about what they've got planned, how they got to this point, and where they are at?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Tyler Manick. I'm the attorney for the applicant Rubino Ventures, doing business as Duchess Cannabis. Duchess Cannabis is here seeking a conditional use permit to operate a recreational cannabis dispensary in the GC General Commercial District at 144 South Randall Road and reactivate a long vacant space at 144 South Randall Road with a new retail use not present currently in Batavia. We're going to be creating jobs, substantial tax revenue, and with adding new visitors to the Randall Road commercial corridor who will enhance the overall local commercial activity on that street. On December 18th, as Drew did mention, we did present to the Plan Commission, and we concur with each of the Plan Commission's findings and the statements made in the staff report. In addition, the Plan Commission made numerous conditions to our application, which are present in the ordinance in your packet. We agree with each of those conditions. They're conditions that we would have put on ourselves anyways. We do have a presentation here today, a presentation similar to what we put forth at Plan Commission. We'll try to be a little bit more brief with it, and we'll be all open for questions afterwards. I am joined by the Vice President of Retail Operations, Alexis Prow, Patrick Coyne, the architect, Lynn Beans, the applicant's traffic engineer, and John Severino with the applicant's security team. We're all open for questions, but for now, I'll just turn it over to Alexis, who's going to share a little bit more about themselves.
Hello, thank you for taking the time to listen to us. I did want to take some opportunity for you guys to get to know who Duchess Cannabis is. So as stated before, we are a women-owned and women-operated company, which makes us unique. My team and I, we have a lot of cannabis and retail experience to bring to the table. Myself, I've been in multi-unit management for over 21 years, so you're getting somebody with a lot of retail experience. When it comes to my corporate team, we have a combined 17 years of cannabis experience. One of our associates has been in cannabis for 10 plus years since the inception of medical program. So that's a lot of experience you're getting. Myself, I've worked for various different companies. I've worked for Amazon, I've worked for GameStop, I've worked for a multi-state cannabis operator, I've worked for a smaller cannabis operator, and now I'm here at Duchess. So we really bring a lot to the table. We do have the 2 operational stores in Oak Park and Morton Grove, and we are working and we have construction in North Riverside as well as Lake Zurich. You already know the planned location. Our hours of operation are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and then we will be a Sunday 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. As stated before, we do plan on hiring around 17 associates, and at our peak time or peak days, we would have about 7 associates on staff, and that can fluctuate depending on the volume and the sales. So why Duchess? We talked about us being a women-owned and women-operated, but we are really committed to exceptional customer service and unparalleled product quality. We like to work with small craft, social equity, cannabis cultivators, and infusers. We really take the time to look at our menu and craft a menu that will fit our customers' needs and the products that they are looking for. And we pride ourselves on the value offerings we have for customers, and our prices really can't be beat. We do like to be involved with the community. In other communities that we're involved in, we are on their Chamber of Commerce memberships. For Oak Park, we're part of the Downtown Oak Park Association. And we do participate in community events if we are allowed. We've done sponsorships. We really want the communities to get to know us and us to get to know the communities that we're involved in. Just a quick sneak peek of 2 of the locations that we took over and how we revitalized them and really changed it around. We really want to create a warm, inviting, upscale look in our stores. We don't do neon, we don't do flashy signs. We have just a very nice look within our locations. Left side is the old MedMen locations, right side is us. You can see the comparison as well. The outside and what we did to the Oak Park, Downtown Oak Park location. Our colors are royal teal and gold. We really like our colors. And this is the Arby's location that has been abandoned for a while. And again, we're going to bring that revitalization to a business that has been closed for a while. This is our site renderings and what we will turn it into. And our site design, talking about different circulation. We will be closing off that drive-through from circulation. Our deliveries always enter from one single access point. They never come in from the front of the building. We're actually not allowed to bring product into the front. So those will all come from the back. And what we want to make sure is that we have those bike spaces for customers who are biking to make sure they have a place to park. So we're looking up to 7 bike locations there. 70% of our business is done with online ordering, and 80% of our business is done from loyal customers. So we do have a lot of customers that place orders ahead of time, which allows them for quick in and quick out access into the stores. And we do feel that 36 existing parking spaces are enough to accommodate that, especially because we have a lot of online pre-ordering that happens in our locations. So floor plan, this is what I really want to get into because this is where we get to talk about the security in our stores. So Illinois is probably one of the more regulated states when it comes to cannabis. We have 3 different points in our stores. Green is going to be public access. So this will be a vestibule where customers can come in. They will have their ID scan. We use an electronic scanner ID, not allowed to retain information for customers' privacy. They will have that scanned, and then they will be allowed to go in when they're 21 or older into the yellow area, which is our limited access area. This is where you'll find the POS, the sales floor. But to get in between these different points in the store, you either have to be buzzed in or have an electronic RFID card to get in. Everything is very secure within our stores. Red is employee only. It's called restricted access. This is where you'll find our vault. All of our products are kept in the vault and very secure. Employees are only allowed in this area. We also have the IT room, as well as break room and a receiving area within the store. This is our proposed elevation and signage. I know you have all seen this, so I'll skip through this a little bit. Landscaping plans, we want to revitalize that corner. And then our security plan. So within the regulations in Illinois, we are required to have 24/7 camera access in our locations. If my camera system doesn't work, I can't operate. It is a requirement of the state regulation. I also have access to the cameras off-site. So does Illinois State Police and IDFPR, which is the other state agency that regulates us. They have to be able to look into our dispensary at any point in time. If they can't, we can't work. So we are very secured with our camera systems. We also have alarm intrusions. So we have glass breaks. We have panic alarms in our stores. We have the motion detectors in our stores. And this is monitored 24/7 by a third-party company within our stores. We talked about the different restricted access areas, but even to note, if I need a repair done in my stores, I have to send it into the state for approval before I can allow anybody access into that limited or restricted access area. That's how secure we are, and that's how serious the state takes the regulations. And then we do have on-site security personnel, and we did bring a representative here from P4 who we utilize. They are PERC certified through the state. They are required to be on site for us to operate. If I have a security guard that cannot make it to the site, it can't open again. They have to be present at all times. And one of the things that we like them to do is to walk the facility. So they walk the outside, they are in the inside, especially around the check-in area, and they patrol, so they're not sitting in one spot all the time. And I don't allow them to sit down because they're walking around the building. Timelines, I know it's really hard to read, but this is our proposed timelines. I'm looking to open June 4th if approved. We did a population density study just to see, and one thing I want to note is a lot of, since you guys don't have a dispensary right now, you have a lot of your community that are going to other cities to buy products where you can have that here. And it does show, our studies show that you can safely support a dispensary in here with the population that you have in your city or village. And that is, I will turn it over to.
So, oh, jeez. In conclusion, as Drew mentioned, we do believe this application fulfills many goals that are listed in the Batavia comprehensive plan. Most prominent of those is just we're activating the retail corridor with realistically a retail use that operates no differently than any other retail use. The only difference that I would say is that, as Alexis mentioned, we do just have much more stringent security measures and regulations that we follow. But for all intents and purposes, we do act as a retailer. We're going to add jobs, we're going to add tax revenue, and we're going to generally beautify this vacant property. So we really appreciate your time. We really appreciate the staff's support throughout this process. And we're here to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Any questions from anybody on the council?
Yeah, I've got a few questions here real quick. First off, I just, again, want to say that your, the paperwork that was submitted, and I think it's available on the Batavia website, every time a question popped up, you answered it. I mean, incredibly well done. And that gives me a lot of confidence, knowing that you did the diligence, you've really put thought and effort and energy into this. Shows me it's not a fly-by-night operation, which I think is, something in Batavia we're really interested in. So I guess I have two quick questions. First off, you're running a couple other stores, and you've talked about being engaged in the community, being engaged in sort of the chambers of commerce. How have your relationships with your neighboring businesses been? One concern that I've heard is that maybe customers will cause trouble at other businesses or something of that sort. Have you found that to be the case? And if it is, what can you do about it?
We actually haven't. A lot of the people who are employed at the other locations actually come and shop with us, which we offer discounts to the local neighbors. So we have that. But we are heavily involved, especially at Oak Park, because we're part of the small downtown Oak Park. It's like a 4-block radius. We come to their community meetings to work with other retailers that are in the location. It's really important to us not only that we know the community, but the neighbors that we're by, they are our community. But I have had zero issues with anybody there. I think a lot of times the concern used to be long lines out in front of the store. That just doesn't happen anymore because there's so many more dispensaries here. So it's quick in and out for our customers, 8 minutes tops if they need to place an order, and it's just very quick in and out.
Yeah, my second question, just again, sort of asking on maybe the underage sales, right? Not that I would have ever engaged in this, but alcohol, we all had the friend who maybe would have, bought something for somebody who they shouldn't have, right? You mentioned having security on staff. Can you just maybe tell us a little bit of the policy of if you see a car full of teenagers sitting out front, what are you doing about that? What's the policy response from your business?
They're not allowed to be on property, so that would include the parking lot.
The whole property?
Yeah, they're not allowed to be on the property. Now, if somebody's walking through, we can't stop that. But no, we don't allow for that to happen. And just one point to kind of go back, I missed over this. Not only do we scan IDs and we have the electronic scanners when you first come in, we also do it again at the POS. So we do a second check just to make sure that nobody under 21 comes into the store. We do have an approved set of IDs, government-issued IDs, that we are allowed to accept. And most of those all come from actually IDFPR of what we are allowed to accept. So the state of Illinois says, you can accept this, you can't accept this, and it must scan. If it doesn't scan, even though it might look like a real ID, I can't let you into my store.
It sounds like you're taking it extremely seriously.
Very serious, yes.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Any comments? Jen?
So the one thing that kind of stood out with me where you partner with small diffusers, are they within the Illinois state or where are they from?
So they have to be from Illinois. You can't take cannabis across state lines. So one of my purchasers, we work very hard to get we want representation on our menu of craft and social equity. That's really important to us. So I won't bore you with all the names that we have on our menu, but we do actively seek out, because it is a rising category within the Illinois industry. But they can't go across state lines. They are only grown in Illinois.
All right, we'll stick around because I think we might have some questions you might need to answer from the public.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, I'll take comment from the public.
Hi again. I'm Joan Clayton. I'm a third-generation Batavian. My family, we love Batavia, and I admire all your dedication. I really do. To put this near Batavia High School, I can't fathom it. You can walk there. You don't have to worry about the sidewalk and the pretty landscaping and all that. You can walk there. That's wrong. Okay, it's like having a pedophile live next door to you. Any of these drugs are gateway drugs. I taught DARE, the DARE program. This is a gateway drug. You can't tell me, she was talking about the 80% of their customers. Well, what about the other 20%? Who buys this? You know what I mean? I just can't fathom it. And I know you had a meeting on December 18th, a week before Christmas. Well, hello, I mean, who knew about the meeting and who's going to go? Did the public really know this was a board? I don't know. Okay, and these people, I know you do a good job, but are you true Batavians? Do you really care about our town? Like the people that have lived here and formed Batavia. There's a difference, and we all know it. We were so proud of our football team. Those are our kids. Even though they're not my kid, it's my kid. We love this town. We are above it. And I really strongly feel any parent at Batavia High School would feel the same way. Why so close to the school? Why not on Kirk Road or that little strip by Walmart, those little shops there? But to put this so close to the school, it doesn't make sense. And I remember, Mr. Shelkey, that a long time ago when we had the Windmill City Days, and correct me if I'm wrong, you told the people bringing in the carnival rides, you can set up your carnival rides if every one of your staff members that runs the ride will have a drug test. It's the only way you're going to come in our town. And they said no. And you said, fine, so long. So we didn't have the big Ferris wheel and all that the following year. We had the goofy kids rides, which are fine, because those people would not take a drug test. And you told them, you know what? We don't want it in our town. Period. So what's the difference? 10, 20 years later? Do we even want to be associated with this? I've driven by on 31 this type of store. There's a line outside. It isn't all pretty and all this like they show. You know, it's different. And that's what we're opening up our town to. And all it's going to take is one kid to get a hold of this, drive down around the road, and there'll be another accident. We're just opening our hearts to something that shouldn't be there. And I just can't say that enough, that our students deserve better. And we as adults should take care of them. Because if we don't, who will? Like I told my daughter, the line has to be drawn somewhere. We are the line. I know money talks and everybody wants money for this and money for that. I don't see Geneva's name up there. I can't imagine they'd let that in our town. They're above it too. They don't want it. And, you know, all this fancy corporation stuff, great. But why here? We've got the best town you can imagine. You know it. Why do we want this? I don't think the average person in Batavia wants it. I think the police department's going to have more headaches with it. The number of accidents on Randall now are unbelievable, the traffic and everything. You know, if you're going to have to do it, get it away from the schools. Storm School isn't that far. I mean, all the schools. You're showing the community, oh, it's okay, you can do this, guys. No, it's not okay. It's legal. Sure, it's legal. But is it the choice you want to make? And how can you be open at 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday? How many customers do you have? If 80% of it is online, then why do you have these long hours, these long days? You know, that doesn't make sense to me. Shouldn't it be more of a limited market? You know, a lot of this doesn't make sense. And I just think Batavia, we're above this. This is why, to me, we live here. We love the town. We love the people. We love the government. We love everything. Why would we change something that's so wonderful? But anyway, that's how I feel.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lois Dahlstrom, and I live at 419 South Forest Avenue, Batavia. Both my husband and I are native Batavians. My Uncle Martin Downan's name is there on the honor roll as serving as a alderman here in Batavia during the 50s. We've seen many changes over the years. I've been before you before about video gambling. Not happy about the results of that. In fact, I've boycotted some of the businesses that have that. And I'm here to say today, I'm against this pot business, this marijuana dispensary in our town. For 5 years now, Batavia and the rest of the state of Illinois has had the sale of marijuana available. In 2020, the city imposed a 3% retail cannabis tax in advance of any dispensary in our community. And then in 2021, a zoning ordinance number 2012 was added to allow a recreational cannabis dispensary as a conditional use with additional operational and locational requirements added. And that's what we're talking about today, their slick presentation. At that time, back in 2021, the discussion was for any future such business to be in the industrial park, away from the main thoroughfare of the city. And I've got news for you people. Randall Road is not a part of the industrial park. It was never discussed about a location as a dispensary on one of the busiest roads in our community. Within a short distance of the location sought, which is the former Abby's Restaurant, there are 2 schools, as has been mentioned, the Batavia High School and Holy Cross, as well as a public park, Engstrom's Park, and 2 churches, Holy Cross and the Batavia Covenant Church. The prime location that they've selected gives exposure of the detrimental marijuana industry to our children. If approved, you city fathers are giving a signal that getting high is okay for them in just a few years. Since 2020, the legalization of marijuana has increased in traffic deaths, crime, and destroyed many, many families throughout the state. I'm sure that the Batavia Police Department records would attest to more activity results as a result of this use of marijuana in our community as well. You know what? Just because something is legal doesn't make it right. We have no good reason to have a dispensary in our city, not on Randall Road or in the industrial park. Please, I ask you, I beg you, do not pass this ordinance 2025-004. If you do, the only one to gain financially will be the Rubo Ventures Committee, Duchess. Don't let dollar signs for the city's coffers fill your eyes. Look instead to help others keep our community safe, safe from the impact of marijuana use. Do not vote for the ordinance 2025-004. Thank you.
Anybody else that would like to address us on this tonight? Any further comments or questions from the council?
Just 2 quick comments. So I'm reading in the memo that when this was placed on referendum, that there was 63% of the voters voted in favor, correct? So Batavia has shown their interest in this. And then Scott, can you just confirm once more that it's not in the ordinance, that this is only in the industrial park where this is in zoning?
I'm sorry.
For our zoning, it's not where we've only had it zoned in the industrial park.
Correct. Yeah, it is allowed as a conditional use in the general commercial district as well. There are setbacks from churches, schools, parks, those types of things. So you can't put it everywhere on Randall Road. And actually, if this is approved, there is also a setback from dispensaries between each other. So that would create a dead zone for additional dispensaries. You probably can get one closer to like the Walmart, but then the rest of Randall Road would be prohibited.
Come up to the mic.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, and I think while she comes on up here, as I'm thinking on this, I'm weighing sort of three different items here. And I think it's reflected in the comments we've heard today. One, are we approaching it from a safety standpoint? Marijuana does have a myth about it that it's sort of a safe drug. Well, it's not, right? We know that under 25-year-old use, it does cause problems. It can be, bad. You can get addicted to it. You can also get addicted to alcohol, and alcohol causes cancer. That's pretty clear. And tobacco is pretty bad for you, and we permit those. And so I do think the questions and the concerns are correct. Personally, I was pretty satisfied with what I saw, that the operator is taking this very seriously. Second concern I heard was, does it cause an increase in crime? I think what we've seen from other communities that generally no, right? That they tend to be good neighbors, that the crime rate doesn't necessarily go up. And so from a public safety standpoint, it seems to check the box as well. And I have heard from some of the commenters as well that this doesn't fit the nature of Batavia, and that as Batavians, we are not, this isn't who we are. I don't know, the true nature is maybe something to chase after, but it seems the referendum shows that we are that as Batavia. I think the presentation once again showed me that they plan to be good community members. It's not going to be a gaudy, flashy, neon lit sort of establishment. It looks pretty classy, looks pretty nice. And that's next to my ward. I will be driving past that every single day of my life from here on out. And I don't feel like it would be out of place. If anything, no shade on Taco Bell. It's very nice, but it'll probably look a little nicer than that strange mural they have on the side of Taco Bell, right? So from those three standpoints, and I think those are the concerns I'm hearing from the community too, it sounds like our ordinance, the operator here, and sort of the reality of the situation show that we're kind of taking those concerns seriously. We're not dismissing them, but they are being addressed. So that's sort of where I'm sitting on this, and I just wanted to share that so people can have an idea of what my thoughts are.
I understand I'm new to this and everything else, but is this something that should go before the people of Batavia when we have the election in April? Should this be on the ballot? Do you really want this in your
already
town?
did.
It already was.
63% of Batavia voted for it.
To allow this.
63%.
Yeah, there was a referendum 2020. It was on the ballot.
63% voted.
Yeah, 63% of the population voted for it. So even though you don't notice it in your neighborhood, it's there.
It just has taken this long for there to be the opportunity
For a license to be available and somebody willing to, put out the money, outfit the building, and follow all the rules to get there. And that's no small feat.
No. I get that. I mean, the whole thing centers around money and presentations and all that, but I just feel like we need to think about where it's going. That's very, very important. This is our youth we're talking about, our kids.
And so just to follow up on that real quick, one worry we might have is impaired driving, right? We don't want to be sort of under the influence of anything and be driving at that point. I don't know if this is appropriate to address to the police chief or somewhere else, but since cannabis has been made legal in Illinois and, in our region specifically, how has training for the police officers been implemented around cannabis, and what sort of public outreach are we doing to try to make sure people make smart decisions when they're, engaging in chemical recreation?
So our officers, we do try to send every one of our patrol officers to advanced DUI training, where they'll learn not just about impairment by alcohol, but impairment by drugs and recognition of those things. So we do take enforcement of this very seriously, and we do try to ensure that our officers are trained and able and equipped to be able to investigate all sorts of impairment. There are also drug recognition experts in the area that we have access to and could rely on in the event that that was needed as well.
We feel prepared, I think is. That's all right, I mumbled.
Yes, we feel prepared.
Is there there's not like a breathalyzer test like they do for alcohol? If you pull a kid over, an adult over, how can you tell how much they've had? I mean, can you tell?
So there is not a current test in Illinois that will measure the exact amount without taking a blood sample and sending it to a laboratory.
If I were to go to this party, how would I know how much I can take before I'm safe to not drive? Or do you know as a person? I mean,
So our officers are trained to recognize impairment. If they identify signs of impairment and they suspect the particular substance causing that impairment, they can take, through implied consent, they can take the individual to a hospital, get a blood sample, and send that off for testing. The individual driving impaired will be charged regardless at the time of the incident, and then there could be additional charges forthcoming based on the results of any blood tests.
will our students be educated? So when you go out, to a party, make sure you only do this so many times because otherwise we're going to know. I mean, how do
I
kids know?
think we're starting to get a bit far afield from what we are discussing here in terms of this particular ordinance. We're talking about a permit for recreational cannabis dispensary, not police enforcement of impaired driving. So I think we need to stay focused on what we are discussing here, which is ordinance 2025-004.
Well, and let me give a little history lesson here. When this first was passed by the state of Illinois, I publicly came out and said I did not support this coming into the community of Batavia. And a number of other mayors joined with me throughout the region. But the support for it didn't last long, and citizens petitioned and said, we'd like to have a public referendum and ask the question, should Batavia allow for marijuana to be sold in our community? So it went to referendum in 2020, I guess it was, and it passed 63%. It was a clear majority. So, I just kind of stood back and watched it, and I've been told that because of my stand, it kind of scared a bunch of other people away, and we're just now getting it. Now, one of the things that we did do was the industrial part of this thing is that we had several people wanting to go out and rent factory buildings in Batavia and then grow marijuana inside. And there was nothing to stop that. It was allowable under our industrial zoning ordinances that you could produce products and whatever. So it's been a slow process, and we're at the end. And the one thing I will say is I have talked to some people I know over in Oak Park where these folks have an existing store. And they tell me that it's very well run and that I believe they have security at the door that checks IDs, and you got to be 21 to get in. Is that what the deal is? So it's like going into a bar. I mean, there's a restriction as to the age. So, I can understand the sentiments about Batavia High School and Holy Cross and whatever, but none of those kids are going to be able to get into this place. I mean, they got to go to college and then some to be able to qualify to get themselves in the door from an age perspective. And what I'm hearing in Oak Park is that these people strongly follow that restriction and say, okay, you got to be the age to be able to get in here. And so, it is what it is. And the people of Batavia have spoken in a referendum, and 63% said they did it. I personally don't support it, but I mean, that's the way the public votes, and, that's the democratic process at work here. And so it's up to each member of the city council here tonight how they want to vote, and I think I know where it's going, and I'm not certainly going to stand up and start screaming and howling because it's over as far as Batavia made the decision they wanted to allow for marijuana to be sold in our town.
No other comments, then we'll go ahead and make the motion that we recommend to council. Ordinance 2025-004, conditional use permit for recreational cannabis dispensary in the general commercial district for Duchess Cannabis, 144 South Randall Road, Rubino Ventures is the applicant.
Second.
Motion by Wolf, second by Vogelsinger. We take voice or roll call, please.
Barraza. Aye. Lancy.
Aye.
Beck. Aye. Pieper.
Abstain.
Malone.
Aye.
Solfa.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Barron. Aye. Lehman. Aye. Ayazi.
Aye.
Malay. Ewer.
Aye.
Saron.
No.
Vogelsinger.
Aye.
So that's 1 nay, 1 abstention,
11.
11.
11, 1, and 1. Okay, that'll go on to the city council meeting next Monday night. All right. Great. And then we'll move on to item number 9, which is presentation and discussion on the police department space needs analysis and master plan report.
All right. Good evening. My name is Dave Yandel. I'm a principal with FGM Architects, and we've been working with the city for the last 6 months on the police department space needs analysis. And tonight we're kind of giving an update. We're through phase 1, which I'll go over kind of the steps we've taken to date and kind of presenting an initial summary of findings. There was a tour earlier today that several people went on, so some of the stuff will be a little bit repetitive, so I'll go through it fairly quickly, but do not hesitate at all to ask me any questions during the course of tonight's presentation. Again, it's predominantly informational, as I know we're taking steps to finish the report and make recommendations in the near future. Joined tonight with Louise Kwalczak and Jeff Lazuka from FGM Architects and Lee McMillan from Leopardo Construction, our partner who's helping with cost consulting and phasing. Make sure I work this. So agenda, we want to talk about the summary of findings for phase 1, and those are kind of 3 main pieces. The space needs assessment, so kind of an assessment of the existing conditions compared to best practices for public safety facilities. The development of a recommended program, if we were to start from scratch, and then kind of an overview of the facility condition assessment of this existing facility. And as we move forward from today, we're going to be finishing with phase 2 in terms of site considerations, option developments, and then a follow-up meeting with community stakeholders as we try to wrap up this report early in this year. The goals and objectives for the project, and these were established at the beginning and have been kind of reinforced at each meeting that we've had with police and other key stakeholders. And it's ultimately to optimize operational efficiency. And that's a key component as policing takes on added needs for training, public safety, other things that we've heard, making sure that we have those training facilities available, anticipating future growth and technological advancements, and making sure that we're always staying engaged with the community, and then overall the umbrella of maintaining fiscal responsibility, doing the right thing and getting the most bang for our dollars as we move forward. So the key considerations that we've also been looking at for the program are the actual physical space requirements, measuring that against existing conditions, and then really layering on accessibility, security, equality, resiliency, sustainability, while maintaining a semblance of the history of not only Batavia, but this facility that they've been in for the last 30 years. So the work in place for phase 1 is we had the original kickoff meeting back in late June or early July, I believe. We took several tours, including Oswego and New Lenox on one, and then Mount Prospect, St. Charles, and South Elgin. We've had extensive stakeholder interviews. We've completed the condition assessment, and we've developed a preliminary program, and tonight again is our preliminary initial presentation of findings. So again, the benchmarking and tours, Oswego is a newer, and these are all kind of similar sized communities. So we wanted to kind of try to compare what's been kind of happening in other communities of similar department size, similar population. So we visited Oswego, a large new facility down in the south suburbs, other similar one in New Lenox, which is about 10 years old. Mount Prospect, which was an adaptive reuse of an industrial facility in a business park that had the benefit of a lot of space, so they got a lot of bang for their buck in that one. St. Charles is a new construction that's 5 or 6 years old and right up the street. And then South Elgin is one that the department went on their own. And so some of the key takeaways is that they've been implementing facilities that are shared with the community, training facilities that can improve on-site training, which is key. And they've also been working on the operational efficiencies and some of those challenges that we're going to identify tonight and recap tonight. So again, we talked about the extensive stakeholder interviews over about a 5-day period. We've met with individual departments, individual stakeholders within both the city and the police department, making sure we talk to officers on each shift. People that deal with the night shift versus the day shift have different needs and requirements. So we wanted to make sure we got input from anybody that wanted to provide input. And this was a key aspect, and the summary of those conversations will find their way into that final report. So phase one, as I started to mention, was the space needs assessment, the programmatic requirements, existing conditions review, and the initial presentation of findings. I want to talk about the space needs. And so on the tour today, we kind of walked through from the main lobby through the facility on the main floor. And so we're going to follow a very similar path here. So I'm going to talk about kind of what the current conditions are and how that might compare to best practices. And that'll be a segue into kind of a program development. I apologize if I'm talking too fast. I got a lot of ground to cover. So we were talking about operational issues, talking about spaces that, as I mentioned, required for state mandated training. Training is required on a 3- and 5-year cycle. It continues to increase. This is not just training because we want to train. This is stuff that's required by the state to meet certain accreditations. And then some of the spaces that we're seeing more and more is to address officer wellness, staff wellness, are those spaces that provide a little bit of respite during the day. Key components are certainly safety and security of the police department staff. It's consistent through City Hall and both. I want to make sure we're talking about options for growth. And then the tools and spaces are going to support, the department's changes and as we just continue to engage the community and address equity. So here we go. We're going to walk through from kind of the lobby. It's a very warm and welcoming space. It was part of the more recent renovations. One of the challenges is that there's really no dedicated training room that's either shared by the community space or for the community or the police department. This is a space that we're in now that could be used, but is not really set up for that kind of broader range of requirements. So best practices that we see are, obviously welcoming spaces with clear signage and graphics, all the kind of immediate needs for the public that enter, controlled access to community spaces, secure access to the police department spaces, and then considerations for storm shelter and warming spaces. I know this space is used currently for warming during days like today, as well as it would like to be used as a storm shelter. It doesn't have the full provisions to meet those current code requirements for a storm shelter, but certainly those are community spaces that would benefit from additional space. So as we're kind of what we're talking about here, instead of kind of like a good, better, best or anything, it's really kind of, we're going to talk about 2 levels of a space program, essential spaces that are necessary, kind of fundamental for a newer police station and to meet fundamental needs, and then optimal spaces, those if funding is available and it provides kind of a higher level of service for the police department and the community. So with the training spaces or community spaces, if the space can accommodate 40 persons in kind of a table and chair seminar room setup, they can handle regional level training classes, and if they can accommodate 60 people, you can handle state level training spaces. And so one of the benefits of having that training on site is it reduces travel time to go to that training, and often that training is then provided for free for the host of that training. So it's also typically had flexibility as a community space. So the 2 spaces here, the top one is at St. Charles and the bottom one's at Mount Prospect. They're directly accessible off the main lobby. They can be used for a wide range of services, and then also typically have support spaces like maybe a kitchenette or dedicated AV and technology spaces. A couple other examples of some spaces that we've designed lately that are kind of highly flexible, traditionally flat floor spaces. Sometimes they have operable partitions to be able to subdivide a space, but really making sure they have appropriate AV and training materials. When we talk about records and reception, that's really your front door. That's the gateway typically for the public to interact with the police department. Right now, there's only one station at the front desk. And right now the workstations are right up against that window. So there's really no separation between the public interaction and, pardon me, and kind of the staff workstation. Sometimes can impact security if somebody's able to view a screen or something to that. And right now, the records area is used for circulation between the two corridors that are at the front of the building. So it's a little disruptive up front. So best practices: secure, often ballistic rated transaction windows, a physical separation between kind of the workstations and that transaction counter, a manager's office with a direct line of sight to the work area. Pardon me, that doesn't exist now. Having dedicated break room and restroom facilities in that area is great because a lot of these facilities are 24/7 or they work extended hours. So not being forced to leave that area and being remote from that front desk. And then obviously direct access to the record storage. Right now there's kind of a broken up storage solution in that front part of the room.
Another thing that you mentioned earlier was there's no ADA counter space.
Correct, thank you. Yeah, there is an ADA challenge at the front desk. The current transaction window does not meet current ADA requirements, which a lot of the building through the renovations does. So you're not far away. Social services is on the kind of east side of the first floor. While the office itself is appropriate for the staff, there really is no special or a dedicated space for meeting. Right now you need to leave that area in order to meet with a visitor or guest on the other side of the police department. And this is just a continuing growing need for communities to be able to meet with residents and provide social services. So having and also typically having kind of a separate dedicated space or meeting room space, sometimes for children if you need to keep them kind of busy, occupied, happy, safe while you're meeting with the parents or other guardians, is a space that's kind of lacking right now. Patrol operations is obviously a big component as we talk about operational efficiency. So right now the operation is very inefficient. The locations, a traditional path for an officer is once they show up at the station, they'll visit the locker room, get changed for the day, enter the roll call, get briefed for the day, then they grab their gear, all their electronics, their charging gear, their tasers, their radio, their batteries for other portable gear, then they'll grab their duty bag locker and then enter their vehicle. At this point, those 4 kind of stations are located scattered around the first floor, so really kind of creating a back and forth and an inefficient operation. So fundamentally, the spaces are there, they're just not really in the right order. So the workflow's a little bit off. And then right now, the squad room roll call isn't really sized to address all the needs. Right now, it's being used for some simulator training because there is no kind of dedicated training. This is something that happens, Chief, right every year in January. So right now, the roll call room is offline and they're moving roll call somewhere else during this 3-week training period. So just some challenges with not having all the right spaces there. So the patrol workspaces, the sergeant's workstations are a little bit, small. There's a little bit of overlap. There's not enough workstations. They're kind of open to each other. So there's really not that private meeting space for patrol sergeants to meet with individual officers when necessary. Some of the best practices, again, are having a mix of private and semi-private spaces, having report writing near the area of the patrol, report writing, like if you were to come back from a call and you had an incident and you need to write a report, that area is actually way up front, away from the other patrol areas I mentioned earlier. So here's a setup where offices, workstations are right near roll call. You've got kind of collaborative workspace that you can share ideas before you're going out. So making sure that workflow is efficient is really important to the layout of an efficient police station. So just some other views of similar spaces that we've seen, report writing spaces, spaces for patrol officers, locations like on the lower left near the Sally Port or near the parking garage, which squad vehicles are located. Just having kind of a little bit more options for how you want to wrap up your day. When you talk about patrol storage, right now there's a former office that's being used for device charging, so there's no really dedicated space, and it's also being used as a field training office, so there's overlap in functions, so it's not the most efficient use of space. Duty bags are stored in the garage and are not secure. Best practices are really have the officers' duty bags stored in their own secure locker. And then drones require a dedicated storage location right now. They're kind of out in the open, and so those are the things that are growing more and more necessary. here's the setup at Mount Prospect Police Station. You can see all the duty bag lockers lining one wall, reports, forms, documents for report writing. On the background, that picture is where all the device charging happens. So it's kind of a one-stop shop as officers head out from roll call to start their day. Evidence and property storage is another big challenge right now. The evidence tech's office is being shared right now with the patrol workspace, mostly because they don't have inadequate spaces right now. The evidence kind of transition, the bag and tag area is not secure and really kind of risks chain of custody issues. And then the evidence storage room for long-term storage is severely undersized. Requirements are really that you're storing a lot of stuff for life now, that especially if there's a death or something, that is storage for life. So physical storage, physical evidence storage is something that, again, we're looking to make sure we have room for growth for both essential and kind of long-term growth. So, pardon me. So here's a couple of examples of kind of better practice for the transition. These are two bag and tag stations at different stations. This is where an officer would come in, they would process the evidence, get it into a secure location, and then they would use the lockers to transition to the evidence tech space. So it's a secure transition of evidence, and then on the other side of the evidence lockers is where the evidence processing happens. And that usually happens, again, in a suite that's secure and separated from the other areas. And then obviously having the appropriate storage for long-term provisions. Evidence processing, right now, as I mentioned, kind of the evidence lab is sharing space across these 3 different rooms off the corridor. And then the vehicle processing area, if there is a vehicle that needs to be taken into evidence, is being, basically it's an area within the existing garage that just gets roped off and secure. It works, it's not the best practice. Typically having that fully secured and separated from other vehicles, other contaminants, works best. So again, evidence processing, making sure you have the correct ventilation, have enough workspace, have all the proper drying. There's continuing to be challenges with just the different types of evidence that are being processed. And then options for high density storage to help, minimize the total gross square footage that you need, but still give you the overall long-term storage. Detention and the Sally. So detention's got a couple components to it right now. The Sally port, the good news is we do have a Sally port. The tough news is that it's a little small, undersized. It does not fit an ambulance. The 2 doors are offset, so it's tough to maneuver. So it's not used as a contemporary drive-through Sally port, mostly because of its size constraints. And then it's, as I mentioned, too small to accommodate an ambulance. Best practices is drive through with 2 bays, providing the appropriate support. It's almost like a mudroom, so having laundry facilities, a boot wash, emergency eye wash, having secure space that's easily accessed, brightly lit, and directly adjacent to the detention and holding areas. And then optimal is if you had a 3rd garage that could be dedicated to evidence storage that has appropriate lighting, often has a winch so you can roll it back in to the space. It's certainly a nice amenity to have. Within the holding facilities, the space is actually quite ample. It's actually larger than it needs to be, but the layout and the configuration does not meet best practices. There's no secure vestibules, kind of like buzz in, the 2-step buzz in to get into the detention areas. Thanks, sir. And then there's security issues. There's a lay-in ceiling there that if you popped a ceiling tile, you could get into the attic space that's above the garage. So that's a secret. That doesn't go on tape, does it?
No, it's live broadcast.
Sorry. Some of the tours that we went on, we actually saw very efficient, kind of more confined or kind of straightforward spaces. Visitors are not being held as long as they used to. They're being moved to the sheriff's office quite quickly. So there's potential significant space savings in a new layout. The one on the top is in New Lenox, very straightforward, a nice detention bench. You're facing your visitors while they're being processed. You've got holding cells that are directly adjacent to the Sally Port entrance, and then you've got 4 holding cells, 3 to 4 holding cells to handle male, female, and juveniles. Training and wellness, again, there's a fitness room right now, which is a little bit undersized, but it is highly utilized. So just having a little bit more space, a little bit more natural light to make it a more welcoming space. There's no space for defensive tactics, basically mat training, the big room where you're kind of bouncing off the walls. And so those are mandatory training requirements. And so right now, a lot of that training is done off-site. So again, the challenge is that that's travel time, it's time away from the station that officers are required. And the same goes for the firing range. There is no firing range, and that's, there hasn't been. Right now, training is done at the outdoor range at St. Charles and the indoor range with the Sheriff's Department. So it's just, again, it's better to have it here because of the requirements of training. It's not a must, but it's certainly an optimal component. And then we talked about some of the limited wellness spaces. So, having a nice, welcoming fitness space, having the tactics rooms, wellness rooms, and dedicated storage to support those spaces. So we talked about optimal and indoor firing range for training. And then essential is that it's a little bit larger in its size for some basic training requirements. The days of just kind of straight line shooting are done. It's certainly something that still gets done, but having a larger square room, maybe even an overhead door to bring in a squad vehicle where you can start to put training scenarios into this live fire exercises, it just gives a wider range of training exercises and is well received. So just again, a few more areas. This shows a mat room on the upper left for training, just different scenarios. You can kind of see the simulator set up on the lower right. That's similar to what's being that's set up right now in the roll call room. So just if you had a large multi-purpose space, you can set that up just about anywhere. Wellness, we talk about spaces that have lighting, soft seating, proper acoustics, where you can kind of just go in and decompress a little bit. This is obviously a high-stress job, and there's also kind of requirements sometimes if you came off a shift late and you got to be up early, whether it's a court appearance or something else, and you don't have the time to go home, just having some quiet space to rest before you start your next chapter in your day. Investigation and detectives, the suite itself was recently remodeled. It's appropriately sized for the 3 detectives that are currently on staff. The only challenges space-wise is that it doesn't have a dedicated conference room or meeting space or a major case room. When there are spaces like that, they end up taking over the only administrative conference room, which again displaces the chiefs in their space. And then just the way the space is laid out, the detective sergeant is down the hallway. So typically they'd be involved in a larger suite, but not too difficult to overcome. And then the interview rooms that are up on the second floor are no longer used. The biggest challenge is that there's no secure way to bring a visitor up to those spaces without walking them through the shared corridors. So it's a safety consideration. So, and there's also challenges in the way that the rooms are currently configured, the technology that goes into these spaces. And so, as I mentioned, having a best practices is dedicated conference room for investigations or that can also be used for major cases, secure access to the interview rooms, and then those spaces can be shared. They're not used full time for investigations, so sharing them with patrol or other functions is often the case. Administration and command, the 3 chief offices are, again, currently properly sized. They're in a great location upstairs. They share with the rest of the department the single large conference room. It's really a nice space upstairs. Some of the best practice, they do have kind of a shared coffee space upstairs. So those are nice things to have. As we talk about best practices, it's essential to have that meeting room within the suite, just for the way that departments operate. And then obviously having some additional support spaces are always nice to have as part of that development. Staff support, so we're starting to get into like the police break room. Right now it's dated. It's also in the middle of circulation, and it's also directly adjacent to the patrol sergeant's offices. So there's really not that separation between officers and kind of their leadership. Having that opportunity to have private conversations that officers probably like to have. Locker rooms are dated. Lockers no longer work in proper function. They're not appropriately sized or have the technology for like ventilation and power within the lockers to support personal and department issued electronics. Wellness rooms and bunk rooms, as I mentioned, are kind of considered best practice. And then certainly we always talk about program storage, not just leftover space being used for storage. We're making sure that we're clear on what storage needs are required for events during the year, uniform storage, other kind of things that are necessary. So just a couple examples of some other break rooms, just having them centrally located within the department, shared by all, out of the kind of the main circulation, but still open to people. And, because again, a lot of casual conversations happen in this location as well. Some of the examples of some updated locker rooms that we've been seeing at some of the departments, you can see a little bit more right-sized lockers for the departments. Warm storage is a fancy way to say indoor parking garage. So right now, about half of the fleet is parked inside, which is great. That's better than a lot of facilities. But as I mentioned, the vehicle evidence is not 100% secure, and there's security access limited during normal operations. One, the north parking lot itself is not secure, and then that overhead door is often left open is open a lot during the day and night. So it does provide a little bit of a security breach. So, having the ability to park all the vehicles inside is certainly a nice to have. As we talk about, these squad vehicles are, rolling computers or rolling electronics shops, all the devices that are inside. And when we get days like today with, the single-digit temperatures or the polar vortexes we've had of late, it could take a half hour to warm up a vehicle to the point that it's actually operational if it's outdoors, clearing snow if it's parked outside, and there's an emergency. So optimal is having enough space to really park at least half the fleet, so you got at least a shift's worth of vehicles indoors and protected that can kind of swap out essential. That's essential. Optimal is certainly having enough space, for all the vehicles. It improves response time. It extends the life of the vehicles. I know you're investing in other vehicles tonight. It really just helps to mitigate risk with slips and falls. There's a lot of benefits to getting as many of your vehicles inside as possible. IT will go pretty quickly. Right now the existing server room supports both sides of this facility. So in a new space, we'd want to make sure that we've got appropriately sized computer room and computer space and the appropriate heating and cooling to support those, as well as the emergency backup power that's required. Building systems right now, the space is a little bit dated. A lot of the mechanical units are roof mounted and they're kind of small and serve a small space. They don't provide a wide range of cooling. There's a single electrical service that supports the whole building. So it's, the generator is probably oversized in that it needs to support the whole building. And then there's, not for good or bad, but there's a shared domestic water and fire sprinkler system that's recently been upgraded. So again, in the program that I'm going to demonstrate, the space program that we demonstrate, we're including provisions for a standalone facility. So right now you've got shared spaces. So some of those spaces increase in size a little bit from what you've got today. And then again, optimal is really essential is to have that equipment, have newer energy efficient equipment. The optimal is if you can locate that equipment inside for the same reasons as the vehicles. It extends the life of the equipment, it's ease of maintenance. Nobody wants to go up on a roof on a day like today to replace a filter or a damaged component. The last slide for this part is site safety and security. Right now the biggest challenge is that the site has limited access. It really has one way in. We know during city festivals or downtown activities that sometimes that access is blocked. So it's challenging during the times of an emergency response. And then, as we mentioned, the vehicle and staff parking lots are not secure. So that kind of reviewing the existing spaces, that's some of the things that it's a high level summary of what's going to go into the report with a little bit more detail. I'm happy to answer any questions to that. If not, we'll go quickly from here. Programmatic requirements, as we kind of talk about, there's the essential spaces, those that are essential for operations and anticipating growth over the next 5 to 10 years. Optimal spaces are those betterments that also include anticipated growth for 20 to 30 years. So hard to read, it's definitely in your package, but there's kind of 3 columns there. There's the existing area, and that's in net square footage. There's essential spaces, as I mentioned, and then there's optimal spaces. So right now, you've got about 28,000 square feet in total building area. That's the second from the bottom. If we were to do a brand new station with the essential spaces, we'd be about a 45,000 square foot facility, and then optimal, we'd be looking at 65,000 square feet. So you can see the kind of the biggest deltas are in some of those larger spaces, like the smaller offices, smaller meeting rooms aren't necessarily used. There's a reduction in, as I mentioned, detention in item 7. That actually goes down a little bit. But it's really kind of in those large training spaces and the indoor parking, the warm storage. And then we show that, and then we've also summarized kind of the exterior area. So as we start to move in this next phase at looking at exterior site options, it also includes parking and other things that are necessary on the overall site development. So that's going to help lead us in some of the site discussions. And so graphically, this is another way we show it. We call this a bed sheet. It kind of lays out all the spaces kind of physically, so you can kind of see existing, essential, and optimal. And so the biggest challenges are can't read that. Kind of the first green column, it's green on my screen, is those kind of community training spaces, that shared space, that 40 or 60 person training room, and then a right size storage for records. You can see some of them stay fairly consistent. You get to the next green column, which is the training and wellness spaces. So again, those are the locker rooms, the fitness center, the indoor firing range falls into that category. And this is showing the optimal program. So this is the full 65, actually essential and then optimal. And then you can see the blue to third from the right. That's the warm storage. That's the indoor parking. Kind of, you can see it's almost the same what we're recommending for essential, but optimal would be getting all those garages or vehicles indoors. So as we move forward and start to study existing sites, we'll be looking at test fitting both the 45,000 square foot program as well as the 65,000 square foot program. So kind of the key takeaways, there's a deficit in training spaces. I'll just kind of reiterating, deficit in the evidence processing and storage, kind of definite deficit in the officer and wellness spaces. And then, if you want to measure it this way, the deficit in warm storage and indoor parking when you consider the optimal solution. So I'm going to go very quickly through the existing condition review. I know you're all fairly familiar with the building. You went through this recently with the renovations to the City Hall side. The primary goal to keep this task fairly efficient was to review the report that was done about 5 or 7 years ago, address the items that were fixed as part of that report and as part of the renovations that were completed, and just kind of highlight some of the higher level issues that we found. So I'm going to go very quickly through this because it's obviously in your report. Some of the items that were updated were updates to meet fire and safety codes, which are obviously critical. The elevator got updated. There were some code upgrades that were required to the electrical system, and then the windows to the exterior envelope were updated. So very strong improvements that were done as part of the recent improvements. So these 7 items, again, they can't necessarily read. It's kind of how we measured the 7 primary takeaways from that previous report. So back in 2015, it's almost 10 years old. They were listed as deficient, and so we've kind of updated those that we concur that it's still deficient, the correction's been completed, or it's something that we're still reviewing with the city staff. And so that goes into the overall takeaway is that there's additional building kind of code and health safety items that need to be addressed. The building envelope and the mechanical systems, again, addressing those individual smaller HVAC units and getting something a little bit more efficient. Just there's always ongoing maintenance, building maintenance issues. The staff has done a tremendous job. The building, for being 100+ years old, is in tremendous shape and obviously had a great historic character to it. There's some exterior doors that could be upgraded. There's some masonry item work on the north elevation that could be updated. But fundamentally, those are things that are in your current capital plan to address on a regular basis. So I'm going to go very quickly through this, if that's okay. Just generally, the building's in very good condition. There's some, as I mentioned, some exterior envelope work, some tuck pointing, and some exterior doors that could be updated. But generally, the interior finishes are in good condition. There is continuing updates. A lot was updated as part of these interior renovations, and that has started to find its way into the police department side. So I understand that's continuing as funds are available. Structurally, there's kind of 2 major components. There's the wood frame historic structure, and then there's a prefab metal building that is the garage portion on the north side. Both are in very good condition. Repairs have been made over time to both assemblies. If the building was to be repurposed or kind of any major renovation, especially for a police department, there'd probably be a more detailed structural analysis that would need to be done just to make sure that we're meeting all current codes. Again, there have been some water damage over time that's been documented, and there have been repairs made to date. We also mentioned that there is not a code compliant storm shelter that's very viable in this structure. There's code requirements for a storm shelter is that it's kind of structurally independent from the other structure. It's got its own water feed. It's got its own electrical feed. It kind of needs to live on its own. It needs to have its own restroom. So that would be something that we would talk about in more detail as we talk about a community space. We talked a little bit about the mechanical spaces. Again, they're fairly basic. The temperature controls are in need of upgrading, and really finding a way to maybe find a larger, more efficient unit that has variable air volume to provide a little bit more energy efficient delivery of heating and cooling would be recommended. Plumbing systems are in good shape. As we mentioned, the water systems main service has been updated lately. There have been some reported issues with the hot water system, but staff is looking at that. And it's been recommended to implement a water softener system. Same thing, the automatic fire sprinkler system is in good condition. One recommendation would be one to add tamper-resistant sprinkler heads in the detention area. As I mentioned, it's got a suspended ceiling and it's a liability there. And then adding a dry pipe system to the Sally port just to minimize the risk of freezing in that space. Electrical systems in good condition, fair condition, as we stated. The majority of the systems been either upgraded or very well maintained over time. Just the age of the components, they should probably be inspected and tested on a regular basis. Just make sure, and just regular system upgrades. The emergency generator is nearing the end of its life, and looking at a central UPS system as opposed to the smaller kind of regional UPS systems would be beneficial. Not only does it provide central backup power, but it also provides clean power to all the new technology that's in here, whether it's your computers or other building control systems. Technology systems, all of these seem to be in fair condition. And then again, the IT closet's in great shape. Access control is utilized throughout the building. And then we are providing additional analysis kind of on some of the technology. The detention facility is meeting current codes as well. So that's kind of the wrap up of phase one. And so that'll be summarized into a report. And now we're looking at the next steps, which are phase two. We're going to be looking at options for site selection and finalizing the draft of the master plan for review. So the options that we're looking at are obviously renovating the existing facility, and it could be a possible addition or partial demolition or reconstruction. We're finding those might be a little bit challenging or more unfeasible than initially thought. Demolishing the existing facility and building new on the same site, there seem to be some site constraints, but we're going to still explore it. Adaptive reuse of an existing facility. While an existing facility has not been identified at this time, it is still a very viable solution and something the city wants to make sure we're entertaining. And then certainly the ones we're developing a little bit more time on are building a new facility on a new site, yet to be determined. So we'll be showing these kind of schematic floor plans, showing the concepts of kind of the essential plan and the optimal plan. And so it's going to be hopefully able to kind of picture what a new station might look like on one of these potential sites. We're going to work on budgeting, and that's not just the construction costs. It's working with the city to develop the overall project costs. So hard costs are the cost of construction, the cost of building the work. Soft costs are all the owner's costs, whether it's professional services fees, survey, testing, potentially the purchase of new land. All those things are kind of outside of building the building itself. And one of the things we always like to address is escalation, basically the cost of time. So what something costs today is not the same as what it's going to cost 2 years from now or 5 years from now. So when we give you these numbers, we have, there's lots of data out there on kind of cost indexes and how inflation's worked over time. So just the one on the right is from Ryder, Levitt, Bucknell. There's most of the contractors in this area have a local Chicago factor. So it's tracking the cost of, basically inflation or escalation over time. So it's important to understand the timeliness of making a decision or what the cost of making a decision has on the overall cost of a project. So, we'll talk about, as I mentioned, the essential and optimal spaces, initial cost versus life cycle costs. Sometimes something's cheaper, but it's got to be maintained more often, whereas if you invest a little bit more upfront, it reduces long-term maintenance costs. And certainly options, there's always good, better, best. And we're always going to present value, and we always want to make cost a part of every decision as we move forward. And one of the big things we're really looking forward to is once we get to a point where we've got enough information is really kind of a town hall meeting with the other community stakeholders. So this is just a preliminary list of who we'd love to have at the table. Obviously anybody else that's interested or we want to talk about inviting to make sure that we're addressing the community's needs that might be part of this facility as well. So next steps is finalizing, again, the final report. Or after we get through all that, we'll be finalizing the report. We'll be including the findings from both phase one and phase two, and we'll be back here hopefully in the very near future to present the kind of draft of that report to City Council. So in summary, we're going to be developing potential solutions, budgets for those solutions, prepare the draft for internal staff report, have the town hall meeting, prepare the final report, and make that presentation to council. I did have a schedule. So again, we started back in June. Here we are, presentation of initial findings here in January. So we will be looking to wrap up or get through this in the next 6 to 8 weeks. Depending on timing, and this might slip into March, but right now we're anxious to move this forward this spring. And with that, thank you for your patience, and I'm open to any questions.
You're on.
Yeah, I would just like to say, I'm very impressed with what they've done here. You've done a very nice job. You've identified all the issues, and I think it's something we need to do. We're very fortunate, manpower-wise, to have an exceptionally good police department, and we need to give them the best possible location and facilities that they have, and we've got good people from the top to the bottom, and so we got a lot to be proud of in Batavia when it comes to the police department. I have another role in the region. I serve as chairman of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning's Council of Mayors, and we're the ones that oversee the distribution of the federal transportation dollars. So because I have that role, I get to know most of the mayors in the Chicagoland area. And I've had the opportunity, some of the names, the towns you flashed on the screen there who had already been through this, I've had the opportunity to talk to most of them. And everybody seems to be pleased that they did it. They tell me that, and Laura and I have discussed this, the one kind of spike in the room, if you will, that causes a problem is if you decide you're going to move the police station someplace else, that can be a real political hot potato. That can really get a lot of people running and working up and everything else. And she and I have indiscriminately talked about a few sites, and there's a couple of them, boy, I'd be really politically afraid of if we decided we wanted to go in those directions. So I only say that because I think with the 14 members of the city council sitting there who are going to have to make this decision, that's the thing that I don't think there's anybody that probably says, oh, we don't need this or we should do something different. The location, I think, is going to be the political hot potato that you're going to have to win the community over with and tell them that this is where we need to go with this thing. Now, I'm not really convinced that's going to be an easy decision for us to make. I appreciate your continued consultation. We're going to need it, but that's going to be the one that I think we'll be beating our heads on the wall down here before it's over. So thank you for a great job. I appreciate everything you've done, and onward and upward. And certainly,
thank you for the heads up.
We want to do something to support all the things we can to support our police department. They need it. No argument there. It's just where we're going to put it.
Mark?
Just a quick question. One of the slides just before you got near the end, I guess probably slide 52 or 53. You mentioned the requirements and you've mentioned essential spaces and optimal spaces a lot, but then you qualified that as well with essential being stuff that we would anticipating growth for 5 to 10 years and optimal in the 20 to 30 years. But I'm wondering where that, what kind of data you're using to identify that, because we're pretty landlocked, so I don't see a lot of expansion in the community size. And so what is the differentiation between those two? I know some of it had to do with being able to host state training and stuff like that, but when you put years in there, that made me think differently about it.
You're right. It's probably not clearly communicated because you're right. We don't see, based on the information we've gotten from the department, a significant increase in staffing. Maybe 2 or 3 positions, maybe 4 or 5 over time because you are landlocked, and so it's really more about the storage for evidence. So you're right, it did not apply to every topic. And so I can do a better job of communicating where that kind of growth does impact a decision related to an essential need or an optimal need.
Thank you.
I was just going to follow up. If we do choose a new location, are there any plans for what to do with the existing space? We've discussed it previously.
Sure. Well, I can tell you that many departments right now here in City Hall are stacked upon one another. And as we know, in the most recent budget, there were 7 positions, not all of which were City Hall positions. Others were elsewhere, but several of those were City Hall positions that even if you had approved those, it would have been a challenge for us. In fact, we were planning on losing a conference room and turning it into 2 offices in order to have space. As well, I think that there are other organizations in town that we have a lot of synergy with, that it might be, for instance, Main Street and the Chamber are both occupying spaces on Wilson Street that could be used for retail locations. As well, our township offices are, they're paying rents for the space that they're occupying in our downtown as well. And so those were just some thoughts that we had, that we'd be able to share that space and also accommodate the growth in our own staff.
What were your initial concerns with renovating the existing police station for future needs?
Just the available space within the building right now, right, as I mentioned, they occupy about 28,000 square feet, and our central program is 44,000 square feet. So we'd really have to look to probably get more space to the north, which would impact the indoor parking. So the existing space is a little bit constrained based on the program. Certainly before we started any of the analysis, it seemed like, sure, renovation is probably got a strong feasibility to it. But as we're leaning right now, it's becoming more and more challenging. But basically, it's kind of space available on this current peninsula.
I could append my answer as well. We have another item that's coming up tonight that's a certificate of appropriateness for taking down, in addition to the old tin shop building, also the adjacent 3-bay garage that houses the equipment for taking care of our downtown. So at such point as we develop that area of North River Street, should that building come down, we would need more space to put the equipment that we take care of the downtown with, and the existing garage over here would also be a good space for that. Thank you.
I just have a curious question. Above the second floor on the police side, what is there? It seems like it's that attic.
It is an attic space. Most of it is used for, well, the part above City Hall is the theater space. The very middle of the space above the police station is a chicken wire cage that is their secure storage. It's bikes, it's other records, it's other items. And then the kind of the perimeter is city storage, including some facilities workstations. They're really kind of cool loft workstations with views out over the city.
Offices in the building.
Yes, not the best conditioned offices, but probably the most unique and
It's
very
actually
warm with the wood
unconditioned.
beams and stuff. So,
Beautiful views, though.
yeah.
The other thing that I'll touch on, just with regards to the obvious challenges and deficiencies in our current space, the other thing that I know the council is aware of is that law enforcement is, fighting over the same shrinking pool of qualified applicants. And from a recruitment and retention perspective, sometimes the facility that an officer is applying to can be a deciding factor for them in choosing what department they're going to go to. We have seen that with some of our applicants that have chosen departments with more modern facilities, able to offer those training spaces, those wellness spaces, a lot of the things that we're not able to offer, particularly where, the challenges that we see with the training and the difficulties that we have in trying to get all of our people through training, and without having to, go off-site and go to, area partners and things like that has been a challenge. And I think it's something that applicants look at when they're looking for what police department do I want to work for the next 20, 30 years. So I do think that that's another thing worthy of consideration.
Just as a final, I appreciate being able to go on the tour and really hear about the challenges, especially for what the patrol officers go through with having to gather all their gear to go out for the day. Those are things that we don't think of and that we don't see from this end, but being able to really, see that layout where they're going from, they're essentially doing a whole square of the facility in order to just be prepared for the day. So there's definitely opportunity to optimize and, make their process streamlined.
Thank you for, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I'll just say publicly, I mean, funny enough, much like the cannabis space, I do a lot in police departments as well. And I will just say that, walking through that, I just want to make note to Chief and, any of our other officers. I mean, thank you for making it work the way you have. And, obviously everything seems like it's working just fine for you. But at the same time, I know, just like anyone else, your workplace, becomes your second home. It's where your morale typically starts, especially for, police officers yeah, I just would love to see them have a bigger space. I know this is obviously going to be a big spend and all that, but I think it's totally necessary. Part of me loves having the police department connected. I grew up in a town with the police department connected. It's like a small town feel thing for me, but at the same time, I would just, obviously we have, oversight and all that, but I would really turn it over to Chief and the team as like, what do you need? Because I don't think they're going to go overboard on us and say, oh, give us all this. It's like, not bare minimum, but what do you need for the next, 30 years? And let's make sure they get that.
I was just going to comment, to kind of wrap this up. I was here when we went through this with the fire stations. And, we dealt with what was, I think, a Butler building on the east side or on the west side of town, and just kind of deplorable conditions that had deteriorated into. And, you want your first responders to be in something that kind of inspires them to want to go to their job every day, and not just because of the people they work with or the community that they're in, but where they're housed. And when they have to start their day out every day and going to 5 different places to get out the door, to get into a car, to go out and patrol or do whatever they have to do that day, that doesn't really, to me, inspire somebody to want to go to that job every day. And that was one of the things that we talked about when we built the fire stations, was they live together, so that's a little bit different, but yet it's the same type of thing. It's a community that takes care of itself and usually works with whatever they have given to them. And the thing I think we have to think about is we need to do the same thing with the police department that we did with the fire stations. We built those to be there for 50 years. We didn't build them to, be a stopgap for 20 years to get, to fill them up with personnel and equipment. We built those to be able to be utilized by the community, and a generation or two of employees go through those buildings without any major changes. So
I think our call numbers have gone through the roof, right? Over the past, call it a decade, whatever, but.
And the difference of what our police department does today from what they did 20 or 30 years ago, that is a completely different thing. I mean, the fact that we have, somebody on staff that's there to help with all the mental things that the department has to see every day and has to go through every day, that's really important that be part of what we do in this building, or whatever we do to house the police department has to be something that everybody can utilize whenever they need it. To have that space where, 2 officers that were at some issue have to sit down and talk to each other after they're done, that space needs to be available, and it needs to be something that works for them, not just, hey, let's go hang out in the evidence room and talk about this. It needs something where they can relax and they can get through that. So I think it's really important that, we have to project out a lot further than we do on a lot of the other decisions that we make. And I think it's really important that, this is something that we need to unify behind and figure out what, and as the mayor said, where we put this. That'll be the big decision. And then we have to be able to discuss that with everybody in the community and get them behind it, because I don't know how we fund this. Where do we really fund it? And I don't want to be in a situation, another facility provider in town that has gone to referendum many times and fails. I don't want to do that. I want this to be right, just like we did when we did the fire stations, and put out a product that you and I and everybody else up here are going to be proud of for the next 50 years. So that way we know we did the right thing.
What quick comment, because I think we're all thinking in the right track. You know, we're sort of recognizing, you know, these numbers make sense, and I think the tour was a very effective technique. It's pretty obvious that the space is cramped. We also should be keeping in mind it's important that our officers have the best facilities, and we of course want to be concerned about them as they deserve, but also the police are probably the one place where most people interact with their government, right? Most people don't come to City Hall, most people don't get permits, most folks don't do that. A lot of us get pulled over, a lot of us, you know, have to call because of barking dogs or whatever the case is. I was a little disappointed might be the wrong word, but you know, the family room I think we all saw in there was kind of sad, right? Some of the pictures that are in here look pretty nice. I know that when people are interfacing with the police, it's stressful, it's hard, it's scary, and you know, I think directly to the points we're trying to make here, if we can build something that's going to last us 30, 40, 50 years and serves the community as much as the police officers, that's something that a real good we can do for the community. So I want to keep that segment of it on our radars as well.
Okay. Thank you very much for tonight. And we'll look forward to your next report.
Thank you.
Alan?
Yep.
Before we move on, I was just curious, since there's still a lot on the agenda, is there anything we can move to a future meeting so we can hit our 10 o'clock end of meeting time?
I think we can buzz through these pretty quick. I don't think it's going to take us that. The problem is going to be when we get down to executive session, whether we get out of here by 10 or not. And I'm not going to make any projections on that. So we're just going to go at it, I think. Get through what we get through. All right, we'll move on to item 10, which is ordinance 2025-001, amending variance application fees and building permit fees.
Thank you. It'll be quick. This was in front of the committee of the whole before, and we got some direction from the committee to make some changes to the ordinance in regards to that. Also, I provided some additional information regarding the number of variances we had during COVID. We had very few because, you know, there was not a lot of activity going on, but we've now had higher numbers with 7 in 2018 before COVID and then 7 in 2024 also. So the changes that we've implemented in the ordinance were to reduce the standard residential variance fee from $750 that was proposed down to $500. We've reduced the variance fee for replacing a structure in like condition from $750 to $250. We've changed the residential, what I'll call penalty variance fee for those that started work without permits from $1,500 to double the permit fee. So that would be either $1,000 or $500, depending on the type of variance that it is. And then reduce the penalty permit fee in the building permit costs without a permit fee from double permit fee or $500, whichever is higher, to double the permit fee or $250, whichever is higher. So these were all, you know, the items that the committee had talked about and gave us direction on. We, you know, feel that those are appropriate changes, and we recommend approval of the ordinance as drafted.
Anybody want to talk about this one? I think we had them right what we talked about. I think they, to me, fall in line, and, you know, got to get this out and make sure that the public knows it, and, you know, make sure that they follow the rules. And, you know, it's always an option to go for the variance. It's just how much do you want it? Mark?
Yeah, I appreciate the updates you made. I think it comes across as more fair, at least in my eyes, that penalize people for doing things wrong, but don't penalize people for the situation that they live in. So,
thanks.
Comments? Someone care to make a motion?
Moved.
Second. Motion by you, second by Lancy. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And that can go on consent. Okay, and then we'll move on to item 11, ordinance 2025-007, establishing amendment to SSA 17 Hazelwood Point Phase 1 and 2 subdivision.
Sure, I'll keep this one brief too. Basically, last year we did have the approval of the Zimbrov subdivision, which basically reconfigured 2 lots on Beckman and South Redant Road. The property that was on Beckman was part of SSA 17. So one of the conditions of approval was to make a modification to the existing SSA to incorporate the property that the property owner was incorporating into their main residence property. So last year, 2024-062 was approved, which, as you may recall, SSAs have a very formal process of what we have to do and the timing of different steps. So we do have a public hearing scheduled for Tuesday's council meeting at 7:05. So that hearing would be to consider the proposed amendment, which would basically incorporate the property that is now considered by the owner as part of the 1217 Beckman into their property. One of the benefits of this is it will allow them to, well, really the county to consolidate the tax parcels, because they'll all be under, even though they were divided, they would still be treating some of the parcels separately because of it being a different tax body. So all the tax bodies will line up and they'll be able to consolidate those properties. So we do recommend approval of ordinance 2025-07 as presented tonight. And then, there will be a public hearing scheduled for testimony per state requirements for the SSA. So,
any questions on this one? Sounds pretty straightforward to me. I'll make the motion that we recommend to council ordinance 2025-007, establishing an amendment to SSA 17, Hazelwood Point Phase 1 and 2 subdivision.
Second.
Motion by Wolf, second by Solfa. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that one carries. Consent agenda? Or regular?
As of the public hearing component.
Public hearing part, okay. Will we have a date for that when we do that next week or not?
So it will be at Monday's council meeting. It's been noticed and published for that.
Okay, great, thank you. Move on to ordinance 2025-002, authorizing approval for certificate of appropriateness for buildings at 112 North River Street.
We're just trying to get our steps in by having Drew and I go back and forth with the items. So just so you know, that's
this one will be easy. The next one won't.
Yes.
Maybe.
So the first one is the COA for the demolition of the 3-bay garage. This is the garage that required as part of the Larson Becker acquisition. The HPC had recommended approval of the demolition. It meets the criteria for removal of the structure because of the fact that it is not a historic structure. So they recommended in favor of that. So our recommendation is to approve of ordinance 2025-002.
I have one question. When that comes down, what are we going to put in its place? Is it going to be just grade it down to level and grass seeded, or what are we going to do with it?
It would end up being leveled and, put some type of, ground cover on it for the time being, similar to what we did with the house when we demoed it north of there. The idea behind this is to get the site ready for marketing it for development. So.
We don't anticipate taking it down until such time as we have space available for the equipment that's being stored inside.
Right. How long might that be? Are we talking years, weeks?
It might be a long time,
Yeah, it could be
depending
a
on
long
what
time.
happens, but, unfortunately, the COA is only good for a year. So, if that doesn't happen within the next year, we'll come back to, re-up the COA.
Can I interrupt? This is where the Main Street little hut is too, right? That won't be affected.
Same property, but it's
Next to
It won't be affected.
north.
Yeah, driveway goes in alongside of that gravel driveway there.
And that hut is movable, similar to the boardwalk shops as well. So if we did have a redevelopment project, we'd be able to relocate that.
No other questions? Somebody care to make a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Saron, second by Solfa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to item 13, ordinance 2025-003, authorizing approval of certificate of appropriateness for building at 106 North River Street.
Yeah, so this is the one that was a little more complicated because it's a contributing building in the downtown district. It has been something that we acquired also as part of, our land acquisitions in that area. And we had looked at one point, as you recall, trying to reuse that building for bathrooms, maybe putting apartments on the second floor, using the ground floor for commercial. After we looked at going out to RFP to try and figure out, how much it would be, just looking at the architectural costs were going to be a substantial amount of money to try and rehab that building. On top of that, as time has gone on, Gary and I have gone in the building a number of times, and we have seen it progressively deteriorate over time, unfortunately. The floor has sunk. We had the HPC go into the building and take a look at what's going on there. And unfortunately, it's just getting to the point where it's, not going to be cost effective to maintain that, and so that is the purpose of the demolition COA. It's kind of a two-part demolition COA. We would, suggest that we offer it up at a short period of time to relocate the building. And if we can't find an interested party to do it, say by the end of March, then we would go ahead and demo the building. The HPC did have a caveat in that approval to one, save the sign that's on the side of the building, so that might be that would be cut out and used somewhere else as a display, but then also to allow salvage of the materials. There are some people that would like to maybe salvage the siding for some other purpose. Some of the beams could be good inside the building to reuse that for some other purpose somewhere. So they did suggest as part of their recommendation to allow salvage of the building materials if we decide we're going to go ahead and demolish that. So they did recommend in favor of demolishing it after touring the building, just because it is in such poor condition. So they did make a recommendation to approve of the COA. Demolition COAs for these types of structures do also have to go to the city council as well. So it based on the HPC input, and then your vote is the final decision.
Questions, comments? I really feel like I'm fine to give this building away if we could find a project downtown that would reuse some or all of the lumber that's there. Knowing the age of the building, I'm imagining that there's got to be some of it that's salvageable to be used in some kind of project downtown. I'll just say I'm trying to find something for it because I like to see it stay downtown. Plus, I always think it's nice when you can take a building down that I'm not really sure who has the connection to it or what the real historical value of that particular building is, but it would just be cool to be able to say, we took this building down and now it became this in downtown. So I think that would be something that I would definitely like us to support, and hopefully we can find that project to get that to when it comes down, so that does get reused, and it is something that stays downtown. Now, whether or not the sign and stuff on the side of it becomes, some moving plaque or something that we figure out from that, if it can't be worked into a project downtown, I think it's cool enough to save that somewhere, and we can find a place for that. We've got enough other buildings downtown, it could just be the side of, a mural on the side of it, basically, and we'd be able to preserve it. So, Mark?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, with the potential for salvage materials out of that, it'd be potentially interesting if somebody approached us saying, yes, I want to salvage those materials, and then they take care of the demo. I don't know if that's something that we've considered. Ultimately, I'd love for it to just be moved, but I know cost is pretty prohibitive and probably not going to happen, but I just wonder if we can get away with not having to spend anything or spend minimal because somebody comes in and takes all the wood, and then because they're going to sell it, they're going to use it for something creative if we can't.
Yeah, I think, we could certainly offer it up, if we say we're going to demolish it and, we get somebody that says, you know what, I would really love to salvage 50% of the building structure. You know, we could have somebody come and, you know, take those parts, and then whatever's left, we would demo. So, I mean, we still have to spend some costs on demo and site restoration no matter what. So, but, you know, that would be something certainly we could offer up, and if there's an interested party. Everybody loves the barnwood. I mean, that's something that people love.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's worth a lot of money a lot of times. So people love that, and, you know, maybe they can use that siding for that type of an application too.
Is there a foundation underneath that, like a basement to that building?
There's
or
a
not?
cellar.
A cellar, okay.
And I have not been in the cellar. Jeff, you been in the cellar before? Yes. Okay. It's not,
I mean, I
it's
know
not,
we're
it's
gonna-
not ideal to go in there.
Eventually, at some point, we're going to have to figure out what's under it. You know, environmentally or whatever, we'll have to go through that. But I think we should be prepared for that too. Because that site, including with the three-bay garage, I'm not sure all of what was there or what happened over there for, you know, the last 100 years.
The one benefit I could say is that it's mostly bedrock pretty close to the surface there. So, you know, the contamination is probably minimal if there's anything.
What year did we take ownership of the site?
We bought this with the rest of the Larson Becker properties, so that was around
2016.
2016, yeah.
When did we market it for redevelopment?
We marketed it about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, I think.
And then also back in 2016, and I'm sorry, early 2017.
I mean, we put signs up there, but we weren't actively marketing it in that first section. But if you recall, we had put out an RFP for all the city properties, and we had one interested party at that time, and then we were working with them on this site, and they didn't really follow through on things, so we kind of just ended that relationship.
We invested any money in maintaining it since we took ownership of it?
I don't think any substantive money, Gary, have we?
No, it was in poor condition when we got it, so we never made the determination to put any money into it.
Yeah.
There's actually old toy drive toys and things like that that are still in there that they need to go somewhere, unfortunately.
Yeah, I share some of the community's sentiment about wanting to preserve old buildings. I understand the financial and the fiscal responsibility to not throw money at a lost cause. I do think we could communicate better, or at least take action sooner if it's a lost cause. I don't like the perception or the example we're setting for some of the other downtown property owners that own older buildings, the level of investment or care that we have shown this building. I know it's gotten attention over the years. I know there's been inquiries about redeveloping it. I've spoken to people that have said they've contacted City Hall. And so I think we should get the word out very clearly about the history of this and the shape that it's been in. I don't think that any part of downtown or any part of Batavia should be put under glass and not allowed to be changed or evolved or anything like that. But I do think that there were just some missteps, I think, on this property, and I will be sad to not see it saved.
It was, when it was originally purchased, there wasn't any intent to redevelop that building, that everything in those two parcels of both sides of Larson Becker was meant to be torn down for future development, which did not occur as quickly as was anticipated. But I understand the concerns there that if development wasn't coming, we did try to, we were working with someone who was interested in moving the building at one time, and we worked with that individual for about a year for him to find the means to be able to do that, and that just ended up not panning out.
We did internally also try to find a reuse of the property because, the building does have some interesting character to it, obviously. And so, Gary and I, spent some time trying to develop the alternative use of the property and see if we could do it. It's just, at the end of the day, when we really started looking at the numbers, it was just going to be way too expensive really to justify it, unfortunately.
The other aspect about this too is that as opposed to that 3-bay garage that we anticipate, we're waiting until there is a project to tear that down. We did feel that the site of the tin shop would be an ideal place for the public restrooms that we have been discussing. So expect that soon we'll be bringing back a proposal to City Council to utilize the existing funds that are in TIF number 1 to add that as an amenity on North River Street. The bathrooms that we are looking at could be moved. They're just, we would put down a concrete slab and put those on top of it. There are utility connections that are made, so it's not completely inexpensive to move it, but they are made to be moved to new locations if necessary.
It's a modular type, the kind
Yes.
we're looking at, so you could get picked up by a crane actually and put down, so.
Just to follow up a little bit with what Abby was saying also, we pride ourselves in being a historic town, and we are very proud of our historic buildings, and we hold our property owners to very high standards with their properties and with their buildings, and so I just want to make sure that we are being as responsible as possible with our historic building, which we are here. I mean, we just won an award for this building, but the other places that that we have acquired, and I just want I want the city to set an example to other property owners of this is what good stewardship looks like. So I don't know, like, what the condition of the building was in 2016 compared to what it is now. I do know, I mean, you said this earlier, we had looked into using the building at one point for public restrooms. So there was this understanding that maybe it could have been revitalized. So it wasn't necessarily thought, it was like, we didn't have the full, like, nope, we're buying it. We acquired this building to demolish it in 2016 because we've talked about ideas with it. And just to be careful then how we use language like, oh, it's not cost effective, because yes, we are a city where we are responsible for the taxpayers and their money, but also we are responsible for the history of this town. And sometimes, like, we have to just use our language differently when we're talking about historical sites compared to other things, so.
And when I say cost effective, it's more or less the criteria that's in the historic, ordinance that talks about, is it too expensive to, do an improvement to it to restore it back to the way it should be? And that's kind of the criteria that the HPC looked at and determined that it just was not I'll say cost effective again, but it's not a cost. It's just an excessive cost to maintain that building, to bring it back to, reuse. And again, Gary and we spent, quite a bit of time looking at this and trying to see if there's a way we could make it work. We thought it'd be kind of a cool little project to renovate the building, put a couple of apartments in there, some bathrooms, and a little commercial entity in there in front. But then when we started, talking to the architects about it and trying to figure out, how much would it cost just to have the architects draw up plans, plus then the actual renovation costs, and we're talking 7 digits, to do that, unfortunately.
So, I mean, it's obviously maybe not something that the city wants to take on, but
if we find somebody that, if we approve this and we put it out there and somebody says, you know what, I would love to have that building and I would love to renovate it, we'll bring that right back to you and say, hey, we've got somebody who's interested.
just don't feel comfortable right at this moment saying, yeah, let's just demolish it. Or, if we can't find somebody to take it, then I just feel like there could be some other steps in between. We have acquired it and now we want to demolish it, but
it has been available since 2016, and even prior to that, it was a vacant Larson Becker building. And but for the one individual who there was one other party who was interested, but I think they wanted it to be donated to them. Those are the only two opportunities that have come up in 9 years.
But we also haven't had a lot of other development yet either in downtown.
Sure, we could.
So we're
hang on to it.
Yeah.
Well, and keep in mind, if we approve the COA, we still have to come back to you. If we said, okay, we can't find somebody to do this, we still have to come back to you with a contract to demolish the building. So, it's not like this is it. I mean, if we decide that, if the council decides that, we're good with this, we will do some things to try and market the building, see what we can do. If we can't get anybody and we decide, that's, we got to bring back a demolition proposal, you guys have to approve the demolition, contract.
I just have a question. Because this is considered a contributing historical building, if somebody wanted to renovate it, they would have to follow what is required by the historical preservation and essentially build that building back up to the way that it was. So it couldn't be where I want to build it a whole different way, do it more modern. They'd have to bring it.
Not necessarily. I mean, we had the sturdy shelter building was substantially modified, over time. So it's not always a snapshot in time that it has to be exactly the way it was. I mean, if somebody came forward with a proposal that made sense, then certainly they can make some changes. The goat. That was a substantial change to that building also, and that was approved by the HPC. So, if somebody comes forward with a proposal that says, I want to gut this and change some of the facade and things like that, it goes to HPC, and HPC, if they think it makes sense, then, they would approve of that.
Okay, thank you.
Abby?
Verify too, if somebody was interested in this, we wouldn't donate it to them at this point? Weren't we going to donate the land for One North Washington? It seems like a much bigger.
I think
Up to the city council.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the surplus of the building, my own opinion would be is that, if somebody wants to take the building and pick it up and move it, give it to them for free. If it's a matter of keeping it in place, that's another discussion because there's land that also potentially impacts the redevelopment site that's north of there. It also impacts if that's where we're going to put the bathrooms. We'd have to have some more discussion about that if we want to just keep it in place.
Yeah, I guess I'd go back to my original statement is I don't know of anything that is the real historical background to that. It's not like, that's not the first schoolhouse in downtown Batavia. It's not the first shop that was in downtown Batavia. It's a building that has a cool, leftover advertisement on the side of it, and that's all you can really say about it. I mean, I just don't find anything more historical about that says it's got to stay in that spot, it needs to be rebuilt there, and that's what we should do to try to preserve our history. This building deserved this. This building deserved the millions that have been put into it over time to make it what it is today. I don't see that that's a focal point for North River Street and trying to expand what has worked very successfully on North River Street any further north. So to me, it's an impediment in developing that area. I'd like to see parts of that building stay downtown and figure out how to do that. And, if this helps push that forward or get that out into the public eye that we need to keep parts of this building downtown and somebody come up with a project they can use it in, we'll give it to them. I mean, I think that's, to me, one of the things we have to think about is not every building deserves to be saved. Not every building deserves to be preserved in perpetuity to look like it did when it was built in 1895 or whenever it was built. So that's the reality. Everybody can love the history and want to preserve that, but to what end? And I think we've decided, or the city council has decided over the years, that River Street is one of those places we want to see expand. And to leave one wood frame building right in the middle of that block doesn't make that happen. So that's kind of where I feel like this should go. And if we can, again, find a place or find somebody, they want it, and they want to rebuild it just like it is and have a little plaque on it, that's great. But if we can get somebody to reuse what's there and keep it downtown, we're changing history, we're not destroying it. We're repurposing it in another spot. Abby?
The aesthetics question is obviously very subjective on what we want to preserve or what the look is. I prefer the look of that building to what was proposed on 1 North Washington. And I think the size of such proposals work out for us either. The one proposal that I had spoken to about the bike shop wanting to move in there and his plan to expand it and double the size and have a courtyard in between was really, really cool. And I frequently bike across Peace Bridge, and it's a cool view when you come across the bridge. Having some diversity of age of buildings there, having some diversity in the architecture. I think it's a
We don't have any more comments. I think we should vote on this. So I'll make the motion that we recommend to council ordinance 2025-003, authorizing approval of certificate of appropriateness for buildings at 106 North River.
I'll second it.
Alpha, this is second. Roll call, please.
Barraza.
Aye.
Lancy.
Aye.
Beck.
No.
Pieper.
Aye.
Solfa.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Barron. Aye. Lehman.
No.
Ayazi.
Aye.
Malay. Ewer.
No.
Saron.
Aye.
Vocal singer. Oh, Malone, sorry.
No.
Yes. 8-5.
It was 8-5 that'll go on to city council with a positive recommendation. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 14, which is ordinance 2025-006, authorizing an update to the city liquor code. You got 3 minutes, Max.
Yeah, so I'll make this as quick as I can. Basically, this is the work of many, many months with many different departments. Myself, Laura, Karen Morley, our deputy city clerk, planning and zoning department, police department, trying to think of anyone else we've added in. So we really took a look at what our city code has to do with liquor licensing, how we regulate alcohol sales and alcohol businesses in town, and what other cities do. So what we tried to do here is streamline the process, reduce as many of these adjunct licenses, which we used to have, where it was really just a piece of paperwork that wasn't really all that necessary. So if you want to do something like live entertainment, you need to get an adjunct license with us, which is in addition to your normal license, which is a separate application via a separate process. Same things like outdoor dining and other things. So what we tried to do was, as much as we could, make these business level decisions. If you want to do something like live entertainment, that's up to you. Follow these basic rules, but the decision on whether to do that really is more of a business decision. Same things with BYOB. You want to allow BYOB, that's a business level decision. You agree to abide by a certain set of rules, but really we don't need a separate whole set of licensure for that. We've also worked on making this an online application process. Right now, we spend a lot of time reviewing and going through incomplete applications, which, you know, with staff as we are, it's a lot of time that goes through trying to track down things like, well, you didn't submit your manager's information that's required. So we're trying to get it to a much more completed stage where we're able to do those reviews. A couple of other things you'll see is we did significantly reduce and streamline our classifications. I think at one point we were up to class E6 plus some others. So, I mean, we were dealing with 15, 20 plus different liquor license classifications that were getting increasingly specific to facilitate these things that were repeatedly coming into us. So what we did in this code is we gave ourselves additional flexibilities through a formal mechanism to really allow ourselves to issue the licenses to the businesses that fall within the spirit and intent of the liquor code. We go in addition to that for a special event and other things. We've heard from City Council with some events that, you know, certain restrictions just might not make all that much sense in certain situations. And so we wrote provisions into the code that allow us to really make those nuanced decisions for those special events, with the liquor commissioner and the chief of police kind of setting those regulations as they see fit. So they could waive certain things like, let's say it requires a fence, and it requires a 3-foot fence, but we have a 2.5-foot fence for some reason. Those are all sorts of requirements that we can modify to kind of fit within the intent and the spirit of the liquor code to ensure that it's a safe and effective event and activity, but nonetheless kind of make it as administratively easy to make happen as possible. A couple of other things that I want to note is we did look at our fee structure and how we modify our fees. These had not been updated in almost 10 years. It'll be, I think they were last updated in 2016. And so we looked at other communities as well as our own fees, and there was some raises that we did put in there. But I do also want to share what those raises are going toward. So when we looked at our fees, we raised the packaged liquor fees from $750 to $1,500. That is still lower than just about any other community in the area. Most cities are looking at about $2,000 for that sort of license. But what that did is that allowed us to raise an additional $20,000, which is going to go toward annual traffic safety campaigns. And so that's one of the things that we put in this year's budget, was because we knew that we were planning on addressing fees and addressing the liquor code, that's something that we wanted to put forward that you've definitely made an emphasis on, and that it makes sense to use liquor license revenues to fund that. I know that we usually use liquor fines to fund the after prom events and other things. So it seemed as a potential really good way to kind of fund a dedicated traffic safety program that'll happen each and every year and have a really solid funding stream to support that. Like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions. We are intending on, if you approve this, we'll communicate with all the existing license holders, share the changes to the code, make them aware. We're going to do a webinar. I'm going to do some end user testing on the application and all of that, so it's easy and effective. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Reached out to any of them up to this point to get their input as to what would?
Yeah, we reached out to stakeholder groups very early on in this process. So we met with Main Street and Chamber of Commerce to talk about our liquor licensing process and our liquor structure. And we made feedback, and we made changes based on that level of feedback.
We also gave them a draft of the changes that we made too, for them to provide feedback.
On the online stuff, so it doesn't get to the point where you get one that's incomplete, half the information is there. Is there a way to make that application online that you can't submit it until all the fields are required?
That's what we're planning on doing.
Okay, and that's one of the things I think is really important when we switch over to online stuff, is to make it so that way somebody can't send that in till all of the required fields are filled out. So that way we don't spend time going back and ask them to redo it.
I can tell you that Karen is very happy about that.
And I think two, one, I think people will enjoy the fact that they can do it that way and have that set up and then just pay for it. And I think it'll also make it easier for our staff to go through, look at the things that are required on there and say, well, that's not really right. That's not so. And be able to go through that at a much quicker pace and get those things done. Plus, I like the fact that we're trying to streamline this and not end up with 17 different things to try to classify each and every event that happens, or, the differences in the fences and all that. I know that we haven't talked about it yet, but at some point, are we going to talk about the DORA for downtown, to try to do that down here, even if it's just a test case, and see how that would function, or how we could?
I think that was one of the things that got submitted as a topic for a future committee of the whole, right?
Yeah, so side note, we're planning some future discussions with City Council on various topics. So if you have things you want to discuss, let us know. We'll get them on an agenda. We know that DORA is one of them. That's a designated outdoor refreshment area for those who may not be aware.
Anybody else have any questions or comments on this? Abby?
I had two real quick. The pour license businesses that qualify, a business located in general commercial or DMU zoning districts, just anybody. right?
That is how code was existingly written.
Really?
So I'll give you an example of that. I think a business that qualifies there is K. Hollis. So that's an example of a business that has a liquor license because they're located in the general commercial. It's going to be rather rare because you'll have to go through other types. So restaurants and bars, they're a different type of license. A liquor store is a different one. So it's to that point, that is how code is existingly written. And I think there's only a handful of them, and they're kind of like a K. Hollis or salons sometimes fall in there, but it's one of our far less common licenses. I think Pickled, the new pickleball facility is, I think that's the license we're giving them as well. So it's kind of those facilities where it's a general commercial, but it's typically some sort of like entertainment or, it's not a bar, it's not a restaurant, it's not a packaged liquor sale. So yes, it's written that way, but I do think that it's not something that we've seen any real problems with.
I don't know why I thought preschools the first time when I read it. I was like, anybody, give them all.
There might be many other issues with that.
And my second question was, how will this impact the language in the gaming ordinance? And because we only allow gaming to be associated with certain liquor licenses. So
We'll make sure that it's congruent. I mean, basically it's, the way we structured it is really there's three categories of liquor licenses. Are you serving it for consumption on site? You're a Class A pour. You're pouring alcohol. Packaged. Are you selling packaged liquor? Or are you doing something else? Those are really the three buckets we put everyone into. And so, if we look through it, it's like any of those A licensees, that's who's able to, it's a bar, it's a restaurant, and we'll make sure that that's congruent.
Right now we had to make a special allowance for a bowling amusement center to have gaming because they did not have the same liquor license as restaurants did. So it's not going to be, that would mean we would be
That's a very good point.
giving them to senior living facilities can have gaming in them according to this. So, okay.
We will update that and make sure that it's congruent with the updated code and that fundamentally it's not changing.
I'm sorry, Leah.
I haven't read through the whole thing, but I know you have. So a place like Sturdy Shelter, I think they had to get a couple of different licenses. Will they still have to do that since they sell both prepackaged and they pour?
I don't believe so, because one of the things we added in there was that ancillary packaged is allowed for Class A pour license holders. So that's not to say that they're a full-fledged selling packaged, but if it's as a part of their general business model, that would be something that I believe is allowed.
Any other comments? Somebody care to make a motion?
Second.
Ms. Roan and Ewer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. Move on to project status. You have 3.5 minutes.
Just have a couple of things. So those of you that have the blue cups can hold those up. So while they do make very good vessels for holding water to drink, the purpose of that cup is to show how much salt is required to salt a typical home driveway.
These haven't been used, have they?
No,
Okay.
just what fits inside that cup. So that's another part of the display you see around this room is about Salt Smart, and the one that you see in the back of the room on the left shows you what a good dispersal of salt on a surface should look like and a bad dispersal of salt on a driveway looks like. So I just wanted to point that out. But some other things that I wanted to make you aware of, I wanted to congratulate some folks in the engineering department. Tim Grimm has been promoted to be the assistant city engineer. And then Chris Bong has been promoted to be the senior civil engineer. And those were progressive promotions made available with Andrea Pedraza moving into the assistant public works director position. And what else did I want to? That's it.
Any questions for Laura? Okay, does anybody have any others for the tonight?
Tomorrow is going to be the opening of the Everdine on the Wilson Street Hill here.
Not believing it till I see the door open.
And they invited me over there Sunday afternoon that wanted to take a picture.
Sunday afternoon.
Okay.
And so I went over and we took the picture and then they let me have a sandwich. They're very good they're very good sandwiches. I think there's going to be a big mob of people over there, but they're opening on Wednesday, they told me, so.
Practicing my own at home. I just get Freddie's brisket and use that, and that makes a great sandwich. Okay, then I need a motion to go into executive session for litigation and workers' compensation. Who made that? Nancy and Malone. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right, we'll have a